We're good.
Good afternoon, hockey fans. Happy ECHL deadline day. I'm Matthew Harden, joined by Scotty Waz. For the next 2.5 hours, we're going to break down every angle of the ECHL trade deadline. We've got guests from all around the ECHL. Justin Cohn from Fort Wayne will be joining us. We'll be joined by Tom Callahan with the Indy Fuel. Later on, we'll be joined by Mark Benetti of the Rapid City Rush, and we'll have you in on the conversation as well. A lot of different ways you can get in on the show this afternoon. You can get in by getting to us at facebook.com/thesinbin.net. We also have a live chat going on. That is at thesinbin.net/chat. And that chat is being moderated by Mike Finazzo, also Sinbin Iceman, and Dakota Johnson goes by the alias of Sinbin Cyclones. So you can talk to those guys in there, and our wonderful IT guy, Matt Thomas, is also in the chat this afternoon as well. I'm at Sinbin Thunder, so if there's any questions you want to ask this afternoon, we're here for the next 2.5 hours to take your questions and things like that. So hit me up there. And then the guy on the other side of the glass, Scotty Waz, he is at Scotty Waz, WAZZ.
Exactly. That's the way to be. And if you have any questions, I probably won't answer them well. So go to Matt, because he's kind of the guy here. I'm the sizzle. He's the steak. I don't know which is better. Is it the sizzle the better or the steak the better? I don't know.
I like the steak.
Who doesn't?
But the sizzle isn't bad. The sizzle kind of gets you ready for the steak.
Yes.
Being a bigger guy, I'm the steak guy myself.
Dude, believe you me. I was talking about bigger guys. Come on, we're fantastic. We're like the natural disasters, typhoon and earthquake. It's amazing.
Yes, yes. 3 minutes in and already a wrestling reference. Love it.
Like so quick.
Yeah. So let's set up how the show's going to go this afternoon at 12:45 Central. We'll be joined by Patrick Williams from AroundTheA.com, and he will talk about the American Hockey League trade deadline, which was on Monday, and the impact that it has on the ECHL deadline, how call-ups work and things like that. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll be joined by Justin Cohn from Fort Wayne. He'll talk about the Comets. They've been on a little downturn of late, but won last night in Alaska. We'll talk with him about the Comets prospects on this deadline day. Then at 1:15, we'll be joined by Tom Callahan. All of these times are in Central Time, by the way. 1:15, we'll be joined by Tom Callahan of the Indy Fuel. Big news, Scotty, this week from Fuel Land. Scott Hillman, he gone.
And it's amazing because of the fact that he was plucked. He was in Missouri beforehand, correct? And then he ran all the fun stuff there in the Central League, and then he goes and man, that's huge for them. I don't know what the future is going to hold coaching wise for them, but you would think they would be a little bit perturbed, a little bit shaken up, especially this late in the season. Yeah, so we'll talk with Tom about what the prospects are for the Fuel here as we move toward the deadline. And then at 1:30 Central Time, 2:30 Eastern Time, we'll be joined by Everett Fitzhugh of the Cincinnati Cyclones. They may have had their two biggest deadline acquisitions yesterday without giving up one single player. Coming back to the Cincinnati Cyclones, Brad Thiessen, their goaltender who would have probably been an ECHL All-Star this year, and Garrett Noonan on defense. So we'll talk with Everett about that. We'll have a few minutes built in there around the time of the deadline for your questions, comments, and we'll recap everything so far. Then at 2:10 Central Time, we'll be joined by Mark Benetti of the Rapid City Rush. Rapid City has been incredibly active in this deadline season, so we'll talk with Mark about that. And then at 2:30 Central Time, we'll be joined by Cameron Close from the Adirondack Thunder, talking about the inaugural season up there and what the prospects are for that team headed into the playoffs. We'll put a bow on everything in our last segment, and we'll take you up to 3 o'clock Central Time. Tonight, we'll recap everything. Scotty, myself, will be joined by Joe Rozicki and Ryan Gibson, and we'll do the Sin Bin podcast tonight. We're working on a guest or two for that spectacular. I believe we have Zach Fish from the South Carolina Stingrays. He'll be doing a phone interview with me in between shows, so we'll have that for you tonight in the podcast. And also,
We'll have, I think we're working on a couple more guests, John Peterson from the Evansville Iceman and Jason Guarente from the Reading newspaper to talk about the Reading Royals. So full day. And our goal when we started this was to have as many ECHL teams as possible. I think I did the math this morning and looked like we were going to have around 12 teams covered. So 12 teams on in some form or fashion, and with our resources, we should have everybody covered. So huge day for us here at the sinbin.net. We're glad you're along for the ride here this afternoon. Let's start by talking about what we've heard so far this morning. There are things in the works league-wide. We're hearing that Missouri is making a move to land an impact player from Brampton. And Scotty, the Brampton situation is rather interesting. We've got a few minutes to talk about it here. Let's talk about that Brampton situation. They got help from the city on Wednesday, and now it looks like that they're going to move at least one player here this afternoon.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation that they're going through right now, is that so much is riding what's happening with the city having to get their stuff together. What's going to happen? How are they going to? How's Kerry Kaplan going to manage the roster? Because this roster is, they have a lot of guys who are already gone. They've made a lot of deals this season. How many guys are happy there still? I mean, that's also another factor that they have to worry about as well. Because this is a team that is not so good. 16 wins on the season this year, dead last in the East, and you have to wonder how many of these guys are going to be wanting to move. How many guys can they move with the salary cap, and especially with Missouri looking around, possibly add an impact player from them. How is that going to affect the fan base that they already have, and how is it going to bring in new people? The $1.5 million, great for another 3 seasons, but is it enough to build up their future prospects in order for them to succeed going forward?
Yeah, and so that whole situation is going to be interesting to watch. How can they turn the losses that have been sustained so far into something that they can build on and turn into a sustainable franchise? 3 years seems like a long enough strategy or a long enough time period to get that done. So we'll see what happens. But obviously, at least one impact player being moved today from what we are hearing this morning from the Brampton Beast. I'm going to be doing this all afternoon. I've got the phone going, and I'm going to be checking the phone this afternoon. So you'll pardon me if I have to look over here. But
that's the big thing with deadline day. Everyone should know the NHL deadline day and how many people look at their phones and how many things you have to stop. It's going to be breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, so excuse what we have to do. We will make sure you guys get the hottest news out there available as it happens, or as soon as it happens, and move on forward from there. It's funny, we mentioned all these deadline deals, and we had one yesterday in terms of just, one of our the people we're going to speak to in Rapid City. They're making tons of moves out there, getting rid of Derek Gauthier. It's the next one.
Yeah. Danik Gauthier going to the Tidewater of Virginia yesterday for Jonathan Lassard, who goes back to the Black Hills. And that's a name that I think a lot of people in ECHL circles and old CHL circles are going to be familiar with. Jonathan Lassard played with the Allen Americans for I think 2 seasons or maybe a season and a half. I'm not entirely sure. I obviously didn't have a chance to scout or to break down the player, but yeah, Jonathan Lassard going from the Tidewater to Rapid City for Danik Gauthier. Rapid City was also busy yesterday trading Daniel Barchuk to Fort Wayne for future considerations as well. So busy day yesterday in the Black Hills for Mark DeSantis and Joe Ferris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a team in, I guess a little bit of flux. They're a team that could be building for the future as well, going forward. It's going to be interesting to see how the transition of Joe Ferris is going to be, because obviously he had total autonomy and just total control when it came to a lot of things there. how is he going to deal with a lighter workload? Is he going to be able to do a lot more work in terms of acquisitions as Mark DeSantis goes ahead and just takes over the team that way? I'm going to keep a close eye on Rapid City on what they do here this deadline. I think they could be an interesting player on today's day before 3 p.m. Eastern time, which is the end of the deadline, at least for the ECHL, until you have the little ones rolling in because of pigeon carriers and such.
Yeah. The fax. I think the rule applies that the fax has to be in transit to the league office, much as it is in the National Hockey League. They just have to know about a trade at 3:00. Doesn't really matter whether it goes through or not. They just have to know that something is possibly on the board.
Well, that's good. Always good to know. Always good. It's like the NHL deadline where you just, hey, these things are trickling at 6 p.m. What happened? Oh, right. There's a backlog because they have one phone line and the operator is literally taking out the plug and putting it into another plug. That's how we're doing it in Princeton.
That's right. That's right. Our good friend Jeff Zavatsky is a busy guy this afternoon for sure. So yeah, we'll be talking about the Rapid City Rush, and that's the one thing I want to talk about with looking at the Rush. When we did our deadline preview on them last week, they had a 4-5-0-1 record at the time in 10 games, and you almost wonder if they're kind of trying to do what Missouri did successfully last season, get players back down into the system who are proven ECHL players, and let's see what they have, and let's see if we can qualify them in the offseason and maybe sign them to a deal.
Well, if there's one team you want to go ahead and mimic, and it's the Missouri Mavericks. I mean, this is a team that is pretty much dominating the Western Conference as we speak, and it's a good system to have. The question is, do they have the horses, and are they able to do it? And that's Joe Ferris's, I guess, biggest hurdle is to make sure all these guys are coming along, and that they're able to, prepare for the future and keep these guys along for the development of this team. So, I commend what the Rapid City Rush are doing. I mean, they're trying to look ahead, but they're also trying to see how much they can build up at the end of the season in the last handful of games here.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked about this in podcasts, and we talked about it on the Sin Bin Goon Squad last week, where if Rapid City was going to make a push to the playoffs, it needed to start like yesterday. They had no real leverage left in the loss column. It had to turn around quickly for them, and it really hasn't yet. But we'll see if they continue to add defense or if they add more offense. Taylor Doherty is not with the team right now in Rapid City. He's with Toronto in the American Hockey League, so they'll be without their big 6'7" defenseman back there for a little bit, at least in Rapid City. So again, that curious case we'll be talking about here in a little bit with Mark Benetti from the Rapid City Rush. So far, again, no deals consummated today, but we wanted to go back and look at how the last 5 ECHL deadline days have gone. And this stat from Joe Babick at the ECHL office, I emailed him this morning, and Joe's money on this stuff. So huge props to Joe Babick and the fine folks at the league office in Princeton, New Jersey for turning around this stat on the number of deals on deadline days gone by. 2015 had 9 deals. 2014 had 6. The busiest was 2013 when we had 14 deals. 2012, 7. And 2011, 6. I think it's safe to say that while nothing has materialized so far, it's fair to say that it's fair to hypothesize anyway that we may end up with at least 3 or 4 deals by the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's also like the NHL deadline or deadlines beforehand where you're going ahead and you're getting things done before the actual deadline, a day or two beforehand. Whether or not that's calculated or it's just it's convenient and you don't want to lose the move and you want to jump on it quickly. Considering what we've been hearing, Could be 3 deals. Could be some more players going. It could be multiplayer deals. Who's to say? I mean, that's the big thing, is that there's some teams, like I spoke to Chris Stewart of the Colorado Eagles this week, and he said that they're going to look out for deals, but they're not going to go out of their way to make one. If there's a piece that they think is going to be good for them, they're going to take it. But overall, it seems that a lot of people are erring on the side of caution this year.
Yeah, and why do you think that is?
I mean, it's so tightly packed. I think, at least chemistry-wise, if teams like their chemistry, especially since the beginning of the calendar year, like the Eagles have been, they're not going to try to screw that up. They're not going to disrupt anything in order to just get a piece because it's a big fancy name, or it's something that they could, maybe marginally improve on. If they have the chemistry there, why shake that up, and why get rid of a guy that the locker room likes in order just to make a deal? So I think it's just a chemistry situation, especially in that Western. Well, even in the East too, so bunched up in that middle there, you don't want to lose a step, or else that could mean the playoffs. I mean, that could be the deciding factor whether you get in or get out.
Yeah, and you look at the Eagles right now; they have a 4-point lead on Tulsa. Same number of games played, 57 for each. Colorado has the lead, 65-61 in points, and they also hold the lead on Tulsa in wins as well, 31-28, and that is the first tiebreaker as we look at it when it comes to playoff seeding. So I think while Colorado certainly can't let up quite yet, they haven't put the X next to their name yet, but I think that if you're a fan of Colorado, you can at least look at it and be somewhat comfortable with your playoff positioning so far, considering that Tulsa's lost 6 in a row and 7 of their last 10.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Tulsa is going to react, because this is a team that, I think that they could be around, but they're only 3 wins in the last 10, no overtime either, so they're not even getting points that way either. So that's a huge deal as well. In these 3-point games, they're not even getting a single point. Do they have stuff left in the tank? I don't know. I think Colorado is rolling right now. I think they have 16 wins since the beginning of the calendar year. I like Colorado going forward, but it's going to be rough, especially since other teams are trying to get better. Cincinnati got better without even having to get rid of any players because of guys getting sent down from the A.
Yeah, and you led us right into our guest. Joining us now from AroundTheA.com is Patrick Williams. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us. You're on with Matthew Harding and Scotty Waz. How are you?
All right, thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. For our viewers watching this, let's recap the American Hockey League deadline, and go ahead and tell us a little bit about some of the big news from that deadline on Monday.
Well, it was just first and foremost, it was a lot busier than I expected. You never really quite know what to expect with an AHL deadline, simply because it's not a high priority for a lot of NHL teams and their front offices. So a lot of these deals tend to come together kind of at the last minute. But a lot happened. It was definitely busy. I thought the biggest move was what the Charlotte Checkers did. They made 2 major moves to turn their, hopefully for them, to turn their team around, because they've been in a real struggle here for the last 6 weeks. So they brought in Andrew Miller from Bakersfield, and they brought in Blair Jones from Utica. Two kind of veteran guys, proven guys who can come in and shake things up. They had to give up Zach Boychuk, who's been with Charlotte since the time they entered the AHL. That was a big move for them, and they also gave up TJ Hensick, who's a real proven AHL first-line, top-line center type. So they, for me, were the most impressive team, along with everything that the Carolina Hurricanes did for them at the NHL trade deadline. So they've turned over 7 or 8 players on their team so far.
When looking at Charlotte, I mean, one of the big things at the NHL trade deadline was the fact that the Hurricanes got rid of Drew McIntyre. Is this a time for the guys of Muse and Altschuler to step up, or and has the loss of Ryan there on the forward line hurt them as well?
Well, it did hurt them. They did get Ryan back this day or two ago, so that helps. But even when they had Ryan, they went into a real big tailspin. They had a 12-game point streak, December into January, About 4 games separate that from a run of 3 wins in 18 games, including a 10-game losing streak. So their whole season really came undone. They were looking like a cinch for a playoff spot mid-season, and right now they're in a real tough fight to get into that crossover spot into the Pacific Division. So that was one thing I found interesting, that they made that deal with Bakersfield, which is one of the teams they're competing with for that crossover spot. So you don't see that every day. But there's a lot of pressure to change the culture in Charlotte system with Carolina. Carolina's building from within. They're drafting from within. So they had brought in Mark Morris this year as a new head coach after Jeff Daniels had been there forever. And things were rolling for a while, and then they hit this speed bump about 2 months ago, and it hasn't really stopped since then. So they're in a real tough spot here. I don't see them making the playoffs, especially given the fact they're in the Central Division. They play such a tough schedule. It's probably the best division in the AHL. So they're certainly trying to change their look of their lineup, though. I've never seen a team change this much this late in the season in this league.
You're talking about the Charlotte Checkers and the affiliation with the Florida Everblades. At what point would the organization look at that and say it's time to send some players down? Because Florida is a team that can make a run into the Kelly Cup playoffs and potentially win a championship this year.
Yeah, I could see that. Some of their guys, especially if they're not getting playing time with Charlotte, I could see them doing that. If you can get your guys playoff experience at any level, I mean, that's a great bonus for any franchise. And now they did bring in a lot of proven AHL guys to take on a lot of that burden on the roster, so that could free up a little bit of space for some of these younger guys or less experienced guys who go down to Florida and experience playoff hockey.
So go ahead. I'm sorry, Scotty.
I was just going to say, let's talk a little bit about, you talked about the Western Conference and the crossover spot there. And the Pacific Division has been an interesting one this year. I just want to get your take on the whole ideal of the winning percentage in the Pacific Division ruling all, and how that's going to play into effect in the Western Conference playoff picture.
Well, for one, it just makes the standings a headache.
Yeah.
You look at the standings every morning, and you're used to looking at the standings, you look at the points column, and that's that. You go about your day, and it's not that way. So the biggest, most obvious factor, I think, is the fact that you have teams playing a different number of games. You have Texas playing eight more games than everybody else among the playoff teams. San Antonio is pretty much out of the race at this point. So we don't really have any. We don't have to go on. In terms of what effect that might have, if any, in the playoffs. If Texas gets into, let's say, a conference final situation or second round or whatever against a team that's played 8 fewer games, how fresh are they? How fresh is the opponent? That's a big thing. And the other thing is just injuries. Fewer games you play, I mean, theoretically, is that fewer chances to have injuries. It hasn't quite worked out that way. There are some of those specific teams that play 68 games that are still pretty banged up. Ontario, I know, has been dealing with a lot of injuries. So we're in uncharted territory here. It's just it's one big experiment for the whole league and for that division.
What is your thoughts overall on that playoff format? It's obvious it's going to stay around for a little bit. Is having one division play 7 or 8 fewer games less than the rest of the league, and the whole thing be decided by points and points percentage, is that good for a league that is held as in high regard as the American Hockey League?
Well, I don't think it is, simply because you want your system and you want your league to be understandable to even the casual fan that just wants to pop in once a week and check the standings and see how his team's doing, how the other teams in division are doing. And I always say, like, I do this for a living, and I have a hard time kind of sometimes untangling the format at a moment's glance. I mean, certainly if you look at it's not rocket science. You can figure it out, but it doesn't make it easy for the casual fan to really embrace it and wrap their arms around it and look at it at a glance and figure it out and follow a playoff race. I mean, for me, I think following a playoff race is what makes any league in any sport exciting. It's one of the biggest parts of marketing the sport. So I think that makes it a little difficult. It's not ideal. I've talked to different coaches around the league. Some coaches kind of brush it off as not an issue. Others have said it's a big issue. And there are some others that are kind of in a wait-and-see mode. So it's just a really weird situation. I've never seen anything like that in hockey, certainly, and not any other sport that I know. So trying to untangle it all and see what effects it has, I think it's going to be something that we have to probably wait a year or two and see where it all goes. I was a little surprised at the All-Star break in this league. David Andrews was pretty emphatic that the system is here to stay at least for next year, and it didn't even seem like it's a real priority for the league to try to resolve this issue, if you want to call it an issue. So I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon, which is a little surprising to me. I think what it will take will be a team that gets cheated out of not cheated, but loses out on a playoff spot because of points percentage and their fan base gripes and the front office gripes and the players gripe. That would probably be the likely thing that would change that. I also wonder how many of the players who are in that division are all that aware of the format. I do picture a few players being surprised at the end of the year if they don't make it when they thought they were going to make it. If there's one thing I've learned about players over the years, it's that a lot of them don't tend to really pay attention to details of the league or anything like that, especially something like the American League, which is a league they all want to get out of and move up to, the NHL. So it's going to be an interesting time, I think, in the next month, just seeing how it all unfolds.
Can we talk a little bit about Utica making a move, getting TJ Hensek, and it seems that the Canucks are a team that are looking to get better for their future, and Utica is a team that does have a lot of firepower. How do you handicap their odds going into the playoffs?
I actually think they're kind of a dark horse there. They beat Toronto two times the past weekend, which is something that is not easy to do, even if Toronto is a little bit weekend after the playoff deadline. They're a team that could be dangerous. They have decent goaltending. They have experienced goaltending. They have a tough home ice environment. They play in that little building there in Utica, and it gets pretty loud. And they have a real home ice feel to it. It's not always something you get in the AHL, especially in the playoffs. So I think you move into TJ Hensek, gives you a top line center. A guy that can run your power play, a guy who's an excellent passer, a guy who's four-time All-Star in this league, and a guy with something to prove in the sense that you're a 30-year-old player in this league. You're playing for a contract for next season, so you have every incentive to go all out to make a name for yourself and show that you earned another contract either with Utica or Vancouver or with some other franchise.
All right, sounds good. Patrick Williams from AroundTheA.com. Tell everybody how you can be reached on social media.
Social media, Twitter is PWilliamsNHL. That's the handle. I'm on there every day. I talk a lot of AHL, talk a little bit of NHL, talk a little bit of ECHL. And my website, I started it this year, is AroundTheA.com. I'm still working out the kinks. Hope to really get it up and running for the playoffs. My NHL.com work should slow down then. So yeah, there's a lot going on. This is a great time of the year, and check it out.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, Patrick, and go to his website. It's a great read every day, and he's done a phenomenal job with it so far. Thank you very much for joining us on our trade deadline special.
Thank you.
All right, and we go from Patrick and talking about the American Hockey League to one of the sort of up and down teams, at least in the Midwest Division so far, and I think that the up and down play of this team has kind of opened the door for Cincinnati to get back in it, and that is the Fort Wayne Komets. Joining us is the beat writer for the Fort Wayne Komets, Justin Cohn. Justin, thanks very much for joining us. You have to unmute your mic.
We're watching his frustrations grow as the mic is muted. And
can you hear me now?
There he is. Hi, Justin. How you doing?
I really did press that button like 3 times.
It's tricky. It's tricky. Broadcasting's hard. Believe you me. Me and Matt know really well.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, thanks for having me on. Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. Thanks very much for doing this. Tell us a little bit about the Komets here. 1 hour until the trade deadline. Won last night in Alaska. What are you expecting from the Komets here as we approach the deadline?
Well, they made a few moves over the last couple days, and that was more indicative of just a crazy situation with injuries and call-ups. They're on an 8-game road trip, which is the longest in the 64-year history of the team. And so, you know, in the days while they were going back and forth from Colorado to Rapid City and before they went up to Alaska, they lost, 4 players to injuries. 3 players got called up, and 1 player was suspended for a couple games. So I don't think that they were actually going to make any moves in the last couple days, but they sort of had to. They were playing 3 men short of a full lineup over the weekend, so they got Louis Belisle and signed a defenseman who just happened to be in Alaska, and just kind of made some moves out of desperation. But I don't expect them to make anything else today, and that's more just because they have so many guys on their roster right now. They actually sent 3 guys home, 3 of their bigger players, Brett Perlini and Garrett Bures and Brock Montgomery, actually sent them home instead of going to Alaska so that they could all get checked out here. And then they're sort of in this waiting pattern too, because if San Antonio doesn't make the AHL playoffs, then they assume they're going to get all their guys back from up there. There's actually 9 former Komets on the San Antonio roster right now. So it would be tough for them to make a move. It would have to be like a really big deal, like just a no question kind of top line guy, because otherwise anybody they would acquire, they might have to just release in a couple weeks when all these AHL guys come back.
Tell us a little bit about the addition yesterday of Daniel Barczyk to the lineup, or to the roster. What does he bring to that squad?
I honestly think it was one of those situations where he played so well against them last week that it just kind of opened their eyes a little bit. I mean, there's some of the Komets brass was out there and on the trip, and Barczyk scored in the first period twice in both the games they played. So I think it just kind of opened their eyes a little bit, and there's a guy that they can plug in right away. But he's actually not joining the team, or at least he's not scheduled to, until they come back from Alaska next week. So he'll be a guy that they can use, but I honestly don't know that it would have happened if they hadn't been just so shorthanded.
Is it one of those deals, because Barczyk played on a first and second line up there in Rapid City, and say for the sake of argument that they get everybody back there in Fort Wayne who's been with the American Hockey League club in San Antonio, is that a situation where Barczyk could end up being a third line guy or a healthy scratch in the playoffs?
I think it's totally possible. I mean, if you look at the Fort Wayne roster, they have a lot of guys who were top-line players on other teams. Like Brock Montgomery is a great example. He put up really good numbers with other teams like Orlando, and then comes here and he's kind of battling just to get into the lineup. And a lot of that's because they got a lot of guys from the Colorado Avalanche who are sent down. So, it's tough to tell. I mean, the coach, Gary Graham, tends to go with the lines that have good chemistry. as an example, he's kept a lot of the AHL guys together on the same line because they have that familiarity. But if you're playing well, you're also going to play. So I wouldn't expect him to be a top line guy for the duration, though. I think he's going to ultimately, depending on the health, have to kind of find a niche as a third, fourth line guy.
Will we see an end game with the situation with Joe Perry and Drew Daniels today, or is that something that's going to drag out for the rest of the season?
I think we've seen the end game. The interesting thing is that neither of them, according to the comments anyway, has even requested to be traded to another team. So they're working under the assumption that both of those guys are done for at least the season and maybe just done. I wish I had more information on it, but neither of those guys talked to me or really any of the media that I know of to explain what was going on. I mean, we were told that when Joe Perry left, it was a family situation and he was going home, and that stuff happens pretty regularly, so we didn't think anything of it. But then Drew Daniels, 10 days later, with kind of the same thing, that one seemed a little bit more strange because we were told that it was a mix of he's got some personal things going on and he wasn't happy with his role on the team. I don't understand how a top two defenseman who led the league in plus minus last year and is playing on special teams can't be happy with his role on the team. So that one just was odd, but just nobody has been able to get any great answer on it. I mean, maybe he was just done. I don't know any more than that. I mean, there was some talk a couple weeks ago that there was an AHL team that was thinking of bringing him up. I know that he had been, I think it was with Utica, and they really liked him. So I thought if he was going to play, that he would catch on with some AHL team, perhaps. But if neither of them has asked to be moved, then that just implies to me that they're done. Because if you're not happy, why wouldn't you ask to just say trade me or release me or something? So I don't think they're going to move. Comments said nobody even called about him, so I think that's where we're at.
Put your GM hat on, though, and let's say for the sake of argument that even if they didn't want to be moved, they're still not on your roster. They're still occupying roster spots. Do you look at it and turn those around, knowing that that the Comets, when Missouri was there a week or so ago, played Missouri very tough, and if you can add one or two more pieces, the Comets have a good a shot as anybody to give Missouri a real run here in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking, do they have any value?
Yeah.
I don't think Joe Perry is going to have any value, and I don't mean that to say that he's not a good player. I think there's been a length of time here that if somebody would have wanted to offer him something, even if it's future considerations or something, they probably would have moved it. Drew Daniels, I mean, that type of player always has value. A big two-way defenseman, AHL caliber guy, but I just don't know that you're going to get anything for him. I think, if anything, maybe they would hang on to those guys for the off season and see how it plays out, and then maybe you could get a little bit of something. But I just tend to think when guys bail on teams mid-season, other teams aren't real keen on going after them either, because now you're a wild card. So I just don't see any value for either of those guys. I don't think it's a big thing right now.
Is this a team that's looking over their shoulder now with Cincinnati coming up, and they got two big pieces back right now? How is the team in terms of just looking forward, or are they looking at the standings too much? Is it just one of those streaks where they're just up and down? How is this team going into the final handful of games?
They've been for the most part really strong this year. The problem has been consistency. I know it's cliche, but I think they are one of those teams that really just kind of worries about themselves, because when they play really well, like from start to finish, I mean, I really do think they're one of the top 2-3 teams in the league. The problem is they just beat themselves, and it's stuff like taking dumb penalties in the last 5 minutes of games, always from the same players, turnovers, and just they have some nights where they don't play the scoreboard. They might be up 3-1 going into the third period, and then they let down and let a team in, or they start off weak and aren't able to overcome it. So, I think if they can just get that consistency together, then they'll be a real player as the season goes on. Are there teams that worry them? Sure. I mean, I think Cincinnati is probably one of those teams. I think some of these Western teams, they've had some really tough games against, like Colorado and Rapid City, Missouri. But I think they really do kind of truly worry about what they're doing right now, because if they're up front, and if they take care of their business, then they'll be okay down the stretch. But chemistry, as it always is in this league, is going to be a real factor, because down the stretch, you don't know who's going to be sent down, you don't know who's going to be called up, you don't know which goalie you're going to be kind of be forced to play, and that may be the single biggest thing for that team as they go into the playoffs. And but there's a lot of talent there. They just need to work on that consistency. And it's funny because I cover the basketball team here. Same issue with them. It's like all the talent in the world, but they can't put it all together on a nightly basis. So I just imagine coaches at this level just must pull their hair out with that.
How big of a liability, you were talking about the consistency here a few minutes ago, or just in your last answer. How big of a liability right now is that defense, giving up 3.5 goals a game over their last 10?
Well, I mean, it's funny because defense should be the strong point with that team. Right now, I think it's a little bit indicative of those call-ups. I mean, so many of the call-ups have been defensemen, but they've got some guys who make some mistakes over and over again. Cody Soul is the big example. He's a big, strong, tough defenseman. He puts up some offense, but he's just got a knack for taking penalties the last 5 minutes over and over again. So I don't know that I would look at the defense being a liability in terms of the defensemen. It's just team defense. They'll cough up the puck, hang the goalies out to dry a little bit, and those are the things that they really need to clean up. Offensively, they've got a lot of weapons, but it's all about how they play with the puck in their own zone.
Give us one offensive star for Fort Wayne who you think, or give us one offensive player for Fort Wayne who you think could have a breakout playoffs.
Probably Garrett Muirs. He's one of my favorite players to watch. He's a Colorado Avalanche prospect, and he's just a lot of fun to watch because he plays really emotionally, a lot of energy. He's one of those guys that just draws a ton of penalties, gets under guys' skin, but he's also one of those guys that doesn't always know where the edge is and sometimes goes over it, gets some penalties himself, maybe just goes a little bit too far in breaking out of the systems, but he's got so much talent offensively and can just be such a pain. So when he's on his game, he just causes so many problems for the other team. And he's a guy that really needs to have a good year and a good playoff because his contract's going to be coming up soon, and he's a guy that's he's got to find that next contract. So he's the big one that I would keep an eye on.
All right, sounds good. Justin Cohn from Fort Wayne. He's the beat writer for the Fort Wayne Comets. Tell everybody on social media how they can get a hold of you.
You can go to @sportsicon, COHN, on Twitter, and you can always go to our website, which is journalgazette.net, and there's blogs and videos and everything you can watch.
All right, sounds good. And Wichita on 6, right?
Wichita on 6, you guys are never going to let me live it down, huh?
Couldn't let you come on here without that. Justin,
I saw Wichita was tweeting out Wichita on 6 the other day, and I thought that was funny. Like,
yeah.
Why would they want to dredge up that memory?
Right. Justin Cohn from Fort Wayne, thank you very much for joining us. All the best, and we'll talk to you as we get closer to the playoffs.
All right, thanks, guys.
No problem. There he goes, Justin Cohn. And we're joined now as we continue on our trade deadline show by Tom Callahan from the Indy Fuel. It's been a busy week for Tom, and we'll start with the situation with Scott Hillman. What led up to? First of all, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's start with the big coaching move on Monday. Bernie John taking over as head coach, Scott Hillman being let go. We had you on the podcast or on the Into the Sin Bin interview late last week. Was there any sign that this was coming at all?
You know what? Not really. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. Certainly, even talking to some guys in the room, they were a little surprised by it. But it's one of those things with 13 games left in the season. When you make a move like that, okay, there's a couple of different things you could do. You wait till the end of the year if you've decided you already want to make a change, or you could do it immediately. And so obviously the decision had been made, and then you say to yourself, well, do you wait or do you do something now? And the advantages to doing something now for this Fuel Hockey Club came down to, number one, interim head coach Bernie John now has 13 games behind the bench. In a way, it's a tryout for him as much as it is any other guy would be this time of year to see what he can do. Can he get this team going in the remaining 13 games, and what can he accomplish? The other thing is you now have the word out there that you have a vacancy. This is really the first team in the ECHL that has gone ahead and said, hey, we're going to be looking this summer. And so anyone, even guys who might still be coaching in a program somewhere, whether it's college, junior, elsewhere in minor pro, now that word is out there. And so you'll get those guys to kind of submit, that they have an interest as time moves on here. You're already on that radar.
So, you mentioned that this was an audition for Bernie John and for really Jan Jost as well. Where does the franchise go from here? We're 45 minutes from the deadline. Is the sense that you're getting that they're going to hold on to everybody and sort of ride these last handful of games out, or do you believe that there'll be some moves made in Indianapolis?
In talking with Bernie on our coaches show on Tuesday night, he had indicated that already his phone was just blowing up right away. Other teams thought, hey, the Fuel are throwing in the towel. This is a white flag. They're done. The season's over. And other coaches are calling, trying to basically pry everybody out of here at this point, but that's not the thinking. The Fuel are very much not selling at this point. It's a tall hill for them to climb, but still possible for them to do it. And so that's the way they're looking at it is, well, if you come to us and you want, say, Nick Petrecki or Alex Lavoie, the team's leading scorer, these are the guys that, teams are going to want to take from you. And if you're selling, perhaps you generate future assets. But at this point, especially if you're an interim head coach who may only have 13 games to prove what you can do, you're not interested in selling. And the Fuel are not interested in selling because essentially, if there's a trade that can be made that makes the team better, then they'll do that. But if there's not a trade made that can make the team better, if it's just unloading an asset right now for futures, that's not something the team's interested in.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, after my computer crashed. The question right now is, how have the expectations for year two been for the Fuel overall? Has this, obviously being again right down there just on the outside looking in, has this been a disappointment, or was there so much more expected this year? What has been the feeling as we sit right now, almost 60 games into it?
When you look at the way the Fuel finished last year as one of the hottest teams in the league, huge stretch run, I think coming into this year a lot was expected, and they did start pretty well. At one point this team was 9-3-1 out of the gate. Then they hit a stretch where they lost 12 of 14, kind of fell back down to earth, and streaky, I think, is the word I would use to describe how the team has been this year, and that's just the way the season has gone, unfortunately, for this hockey club. That said, I think right now, not making the playoffs certainly is a disappointing specter, I guess, for this hockey club. You want to see this team in the postseason. It is only year two, and to that end, I say you have some currency with fans, with the public here. You're a growing organization. Everybody wants to be in the playoffs every year, but that's not the way the league is set up. And so, yeah, there's disappointment, and I think that has manifested itself in the fact that they made a coaching change. So, yeah, the expectations are higher coming into this year, especially for the way they finished last year. But for whatever reason, the team never quite seemed to get it on track for extended periods of time this year. So at the end of the day, is it going to be a disappointing season for the Fuel if they miss the playoffs? Yes. Is it the end of the world? No, this is still a young franchise that's still establishing itself, not only here in the city, but in the league as well. Recruiting will pick up as the reputation picks up, as the name gets out there more and people begin to understand what the team is about.
What was the impetus for moving Shane Owen? Was it just a non-fit there, or did you feel, or did the organization feel like a change of scenery would do him well? Because you would think that if the team is going to make a push for the playoffs, that they need a proven goaltender like Shane Owen anchoring their net.
Shane, especially, I mentioned that streak where we lost 12 of 14. Through that whole stretch, we didn't score 3 goals. And Shane was our main goaltender during that time. He played great. I mean, he played so well, but there was just no run support for him. So he had nice numbers as far as goals against and save percentage, but no wins to show for it. So lately, as it had been a little bit of a carousel here, Matt Carruth has been up with Rockford, and now Carruth has come back to us. Once Rockford made a deal at the American League level to get Drew McIntyre, suddenly there's 3 AHL goaltenders in Rockford, and knowing that the possibility exists that Mac may go up to Rockford or Chicago to be a black ace for the playoffs, okay, there's that, but he's coming back in the meantime. So we knew that Mac would be here for the stretch run, that he would be the guy who'd play the bulk of the games. Keegan Asmundson has actually played very well since he's come in here, so I think they had the confidence in him. And as you mentioned earlier, a change of scenery I think was a good thing for Shane Owen. I do think that was something he needed. And so far, by all accounts, he's played well with Elmira. But the flip side of that is it wasn't as much about unloading Shane Owen as it was for the Fuel in bringing back Seidel and Claire. Now, unfortunately for the Fuel, Seidel broke a couple of fingers the other night in the game and has had surgery. So who knows when he'll be back for this team. They had to put a couple of pins in there. But Kevin Clare, real good defenseman, puck mover, heads-up guy, doesn't mind playing a little bit of a physical role. So it's not just you guys got rid of Shane Owen, which I know is a lot of people who are Fuel fans, why'd you get rid of Shane Owen? Well, we got a lot back. I think that was a great trade for the Fuel at the end of the day, especially knowing that you had Carruth coming back. Yeah,
and I seen you kind of beating back the Twitter trolls on the afternoon.
My favorite thing.
That trade was made. And I agree with you. You know, all a goaltender needs sometimes to keep that confidence, because it is so razor thin. All they need sometimes are just a change of scenery. So, you know, given the logjam above, sometimes that's the only move you have.
Yeah, and it would have turned out to be a numbers game. It was either going to be Owen or Asmundson, and quite honestly, Shane Owen's got far more value as a trade chip because he's a known commodity. He's a former ECHL goaltender of the week this year and previously in Stockton. Coach Hillman loved him, and not an easy guy to let go of, but just the way things were laid out, reading the tea leaves, you knew that Carruth would come back, he would get the bulk of the playing time. And so if you're able to bring back 2 really good assets, plus futures, by the way. I mean, the Fuel, that was really a 3-for-1 deal. They also got futures in that deal. I don't know how you don't make it.
Yeah, for sure. For an Elmira team that needed some stability in net to make the playoffs, and they're willing to give up essentially 3 players for Shane Owen. That says a lot about how Shane Owen is viewed in this league.
Yeah, for sure it does. And the other thing, as you mentioned, Elmira, they had the depth to be able to part with a guy who already had 30 points up front, and Claire had been used sparingly on defense, a guy who can easily work into a top 6 with most clubs for whatever reason. I don't know if he fell out of favor or if it just Elmira's that deep. He was the 7 or 8 guy. So if he's just sitting there, to them, that's a guy they're not using. But for the Fuel at the time, especially, that was when Petrecki was up. They were a little dinged up, so it made perfect sense.
Scotty, you got anything?
I guess just looking ahead, like how are we going to handicap this team going forward? I mean, when with the playoff push as it is, you're saying they're not going to be sellers. Like how is this team looking ahead as we're about doing my math, almost a half hour away from the deadline? Is there going to be anything that's going to just jump out and say, oh, the Indy Fuel are either going for it this year or they're going for it to recover for next year?
Well, I don't think you'll be able to say, and again, they're not going to sell. That's not in the cards. There's not going to be, I can't believe they traded that guy and that guy for futures. That's not going to happen. The Fuel at this point, if they make a move, and again, to go back to what interim head coach Bernie John had said, is that they'll make the move if it makes sense, if it makes the team better. It is a trade that they would make if they feel it improves this hockey team. So that's what the goal is. They're going to change things up a little bit here and open it up down the stretch and try to play. I mean, really, you have nothing to lose at this point. You need to go out and win as many games as you can. So you just need to throw caution to the wind and leave it all out there. And so that said, you can't play that way without a good lineup. You can't just bring in guys from, major, junior, college, or just drop them into the middle of nothing and not knowing the system or the setup and have them go for broke. So for the Fuel, getting that set up, getting them ready to go is really for this stretch run not something they're gonna sell the farm for. As far as going into next year, part of that will be decided by how well this and who ends up being the coach. It is an interim tag that's on Bernie John. And so, again, basically a 13-game tryout for him. Are they going to look for somebody in the offseason? It's possible. It's possible they're going to bring in some new blood. It's possible that there's a coaching candidate out there they haven't considered yet who becomes the guy. And I think you have to realize that that guy will come in with his own idea of players, with his own idea of guys to sign, his own style of play, who fits. And so, unfortunately, looking to next season, it's almost impossible to categorize where the Fuel are going.
With 13 games left, the Fuel sit 5 points rather, behind Tulsa, and Tulsa's in sort of a free fall right now. What does Indy have to do to make not only catch Quad and pass them, but catch Tulsa and pass them and make the playoffs? Is it essentially as easy as throwing caution to the wind and just going out there and playing?
Really for the Fuel, I feel like goal scoring is still a little bit of the bugaboo. They're going to have to generate more chances. And Bernie John, as a player during his career, a defenseman who is the all-time leader in Indianapolis pro hockey history in assists from the defensive position, I expect to see some active defensemen. These guys are going to jump up into the play. They're going to try to make things happen. The Fuel need to get to that one more goal a game. 3 is the magic number in pro hockey. You get to 3 goals, you should win that hockey game. And I think for the Fuel to go from 2 to 3, in a way, yeah, it's thrown a little bit of caution to the wind. You are going to have to press 4 guys into the attack. You are going to have your D lead that charge. And so it's going to be an extra awareness and responsibility, and sometimes your goalie's going to have to bail you out. But if you're going to go 10-3, 11-2 down the stretch run and try to handle things on your own as much as possible, that's what it's going to entail.
And one final question, we'll get you out of here on this. If Bernie John was able to wrangle this team up and do what a lot of people don't think can happen, and that is making the playoffs, do they take the interim tag off of him?
I think that's a good likelihood. I don't know that it's necessarily a guarantee. But if you take this team sitting where it is, knowing that you need to leapfrog 2 different clubs at this point, whether it be Quad, whether it be Colorado, whether it be Tulsa, who, as we mentioned, is struggling, you do need to leap over 2. And if you're able to make that jump, make it into the playoffs, then certainly, I'll tell you what, you've done about everything you can do if you're Bernie John to cast yourself in a favorable light for the search this summer.
All right, sounds good. How can people find you on social media there, Tom?
If folks want to follow me on Twitter, I am at IndyFuelTom, and also the team at IndyFuel on Twitter as well. But yeah, at IndyFuelTom, and feel free to fire away. I'm always happy to chat with people on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you very much for doing this, and it is always good to talk to the voice of the Indy Fuel, Tom Callahan. Best of luck the rest of the way.
Guys, thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
No problem. We go from Tom to Cincinnati to our man on the scene there, Everett Fitzhugh. What's going on, Everett?
Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for having me. How's everything going?
Good. It's a lot of fun, and obviously Matt McDonald doesn't have to make any moves. Lake Erie did it for him yesterday. Down come Garrett Noonan and Brad Thiessen. Talk about the impact that those two have on this club moving forward.
Well, I mean, Garrett Noonan defensively has been one of, if not our top scoring defenseman all season. There was one point during the year when he was 5th or 6th in league defenseman scoring. Had a bit of a slump there in the December-January area, but really came back nicely. Was ECHL goaltender or player of the month Player of the Week back in February with 7 points over a 4-game span. So Noonan really getting back to that offensive production that we saw earlier in the year. We've seen what Brad Teason can do for this team. He was AHL Goalie of the Month back in February, pitched a couple shutouts for Cincinnati back in the first half of the year, and he did a tremendous job for us when he was here. Sad to see him go, but obviously with all of the injuries and everything going on in Columbus with McElhaney and with Bobrovsky and then Korpisalo going up and all of that, you kind of have to, the trickle-down effect begins. So, to get a guy like Brad Teason back for us, who's arguably the best goalie in the ECHL, is going to be huge. So now you've got Brad Teason and Andy Isles both going for you at a very, very hot pace heading down the stretch. That's phenomenal. That's huge for the guys.
When you look at affiliation strength, this is the Cyclones' first time that they have a distinct affiliation. Of course, they had Florida and Nashville for the past couple of seasons. How strong has it been for the Cyclones to have someone like Nashville and Milwaukee above them sending guys down, and how much has that helped the team overall connect with the city and also make a big playoff push right now?
I think it's been really good because, taking nothing away from Florida, I mean, Florida has had a really, really good draft history over the last few seasons. And you look at some of the young players that have come up through Florida, that have come up through Cincinnati. You look at guys like Logan Shaw, who has been playing pretty well for Florida. Florida has had some good talent, but I think that when you can finally etch and attach your name to one team, in this case Nashville, 4 hours down the road, for us, it really helps us out in terms of being able to identify and put our name with one team. As far as on the ice, I mean, you look at what Nashville's been able to do, you look at what Milwaukee's been able to do. Both of those teams are going to make the playoffs in their respective leagues. So when you can have a lot of the top talent from Nashville, an up-and-coming team in the NHL, they've made a lot of big moves over the last few seasons, so they're bringing up a lot of their younger guys, and as a result, excuse me, you're going to start to see that trickle-down effect like I was talking about come here to Cincinnati. So your Garrett Noonans, your Joe Pendenzas, your Jonathan Diabis, being able to get some of that playing time here is going to be huge. So I think the relationship with Nashville and then subsequently with Milwaukee has really helped out the Cyclones a lot.
What's been the source of the turnaround for Cincinnati? They had, got out to a really good start in October and November, seemed to have a pretty significant downturn in December, early to mid-January, and then all of a sudden, mid to late January rolls around, and it's like the switch flipped for this team. What was the impetus for the turnaround?
I think it was one of those things where you look at where the Cyclones were. That month of January was really bad in terms of a scheduling standpoint, because you look at the Cyclones, you're in Missouri and then Wichita, your last 3 games of the first half. You come home for 2 games. You go on the road for 10 days against South Carolina, Atlanta, Norfolk, all tough teams to play against. You come home for 1 game against a division rival in Fort Wayne, and then you go right back on the road. The game was over at 10. We were on the bus headed to Allen at midnight for a 3-game series in Allen, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So you're looking at all of those games on the road, not a lot of home time, and I think life on the road, it can be a little bit tough. That, I think, was kind of one of the main reasons for the struggles. You look at the trades the Cyclones made around then. You bring in Tommy Mealy from Norfolk. You bring in Andrew Blazik, who has been, both of those guys have been playing really well. And then, oh, by the way, you claim Andy Isles off of waivers, who has done nothing but wrap up ECHL goaltender of the month for February and posted 11 wins in his first 17 games with the Cyclones. So I think being able to mix up a little bit, getting some of that new blood in here, and also to get back to playing at home. I mean, the Cyclones were a team that struggled at home, or on the road, I should say, a lot in the first half of the season, early part of the second half after Christmas, but you're getting a lot of those home games, being able to play in front of that home crowd. 16,000 fans last week at home. Again, another just phenomenal crowd that the Cyclones have played in front of this season. So I think when you're looking at all of those factors that go into it, those are probably the 2 main reasons that I would say, just the scheduling, being on the road a lot, and then having to make some of those trades and getting some of that new blood in here.
Scotty?
I guess my question is just how can they focus now? You look at everything they've done. They're on a huge roll, 6 wins in a row, points in 9 of their last 10 games, and they have the Fort Wayne Comets in striking distance right now. But how are they able to make sure that they just keep winning and not worry about the standings, or is it I guess a thing where they're just like, let's go after Fort Wayne, don't worry about Utah in the way, let's not worry about the guys in the way? Are they looking at taking the Midwest Division, or are they just looking at playoff positioning right now?
I think it can be a little bit of both, and I think that obviously you want to take down that divisional rival, and especially a team like Fort Wayne. The Cyclones have played them really tough all season long. That has probably been one of the top battles that I've been involved with in my career in hockey, watching Cincinnati and Fort Wayne go at it. But I think right now the number one goal for this team is getting into the playoffs. And I don't believe, and no one in that locker room believes, the Cyclones are going to sneak into the playoffs. I think this is a solid playoff team. Obviously, you want to chase down your Fort Waynes. You want to be able to catch up to your Utahs. I know Allen is right there. You want to put some distance between the Tulsas of the world as well. Even a team like Quad City, 8 points back of Cincinnati, you still have 3 games with, or 4 games, I should say, with Quad City left. So a lot of teams are chasing you. A lot of teams are barely in front of you. And I think that if you get too worried about the teams who are in front of you, you get too worried about maybe chasing those teams down, that's when you can run into issues. So I think that this team, number one, is to get into the playoffs, because we've seen in the NHL, look at the Kings a couple of years ago, an 8th seed got into the playoffs, they won the whole thing. So I think right now this team's number one goal overall is to get, and like I said, no one in this building believes the Cyclones are barely a playoff team. I mean, this is a solid playoff team. You look at the goaltending right now, the players that they've just gotten back, one of the hottest teams in the ECHL. Now, there are some players in there who are looking at the standings and looking at who the Cyclones are chasing down. Obviously, we would love to catch down Fort Wayne and get that number one divisional spot in the Midwest, and then that would put the Cyclones in 3rd or in the top 3, depending if you can chase down either Idaho. No one's catching Missouri, but if you can chase down Idaho up there, I think that would be great as well. But I think right now, not a whole lot of standings watching, so to speak. I just think right now you've won 10 of 12. You want to get into the playoffs. You're going to get into the playoffs, and then make some noise once you're in.
So what will it take for the Cyclones to catch Fort Wayne? Fort Wayne has not played very well of late, 5-4-1 and 0 in their last 10 up until their game last night.
Yeah.
Cincinnati 8-1-1 in their last 10, heading into play this week. What will it take for the Cyclones to catch the Comets and pass them for that 3rd or 2nd seed?
It's going to be tough, because just looking at the schedule and notes and everything, Cincinnati's only got 1 game left with Fort Wayne all season long. So the Cyclones have played pretty well against Fort Wayne, but the Cyclones are going to meet Fort Wayne on the 29th of March. That's the last meeting. And Fort Wayne, for whatever reason, they have been kind of shorthanded over the last couple of weeks with player personnel, injuries, call-ups, things like that. But they've been finding ways to get points, winning games late in games, in overtime, last minute of the 3rd period. I think there was a game a couple of weeks ago, I should say, when they were down by 3 goals with under, I want to say, 10 minutes left, and they came up to tie the game, lost in overtime, but still they were able to get that point. So Fort Wayne has really been finding ways to win, and you're going to hate me, and this is going to be probably the most cliche answer that I could probably give. The Cyclones have to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, 10-2 over their last 12 games. It doesn't get that much easier and that much better than that. And the Cyclones right now can only work on and can only handle what they can control. And right now what they can control is their schedule. You've got 2 huge games against Quad City and 1 against Indy coming up. You go out of division next weekend for a pair of games against Wheeling, and then you're back in division for Evansville, and then 2 in Indy before Toledo, and then you wrap up the season with what would that be? 5 of your last 6 games outside of a home game with Toledo against the division. So you've got a lot of divisional games coming up. You win those divisional games, you can't really worry about Fort Wayne because, like I said, you only play them one more time this season. Now, if you can win that game against Fort Wayne, essentially that's a 4-point game. So that would be ideal, but go out there, beat Quad City, beat Evansville, beat Indy, and then let the chips fall where they may. But to beat Fort Wayne, just keep doing what they're doing right now, which is going out there, getting solid goaltending, finding ways to score goals. Cincinnati has put up 11 goals over their last 2 games. They're 24-1 when leading after 2 periods, 18-0 at home when leading after 2 periods. So playing with the lead, continuing to have that solid defensive presence that we've seen a lot over the last, we'll say 5 to 7 weeks, that has really helped them on this recent 10-2 stretch they've been on.
What is the biggest weakness for this club now with Noonan back in the lineup as well as Thiessen?
I think the biggest weakness for this team isn't really from an individual standpoint. I think it's more so from playing a full 60-minute standpoint. And I go back to the last couple of games over this past weekend. Cincinnati was up 6-0 on Quad City, in Quad City. Very tough building to play. A tough place for Cincinnati to play this season. The Cyclones gave up 2 goals in the last 10 minutes, including 1 in the final minute of the game. So in talking to our head coaches after that game, they said it was a great effort for about 54 minutes. And then after that, the last 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game, it looked like we were back on our heels a little bit. You go back to that game on Saturday in Indy. Again, Cincinnati got out to a 5-0 lead, broke up the shutout in the 3rd period. So I think the biggest weakness for this team moving forward is going to be playing a full 60 minutes, taking their first period, taking their second period, and then translating that into a 3rd period. If you want to nitpick about individual weaknesses, probably I'd say overall team defense, because again, prior to this last 10-12 game stretch, Cincinnati had been giving up 4 or 5 goals a game, 3 goals a game. So that team defense was something that was struggling, something that the coaching staff has addressed. Obviously, you bring in guys like Garrett Noonan. They've been kind of up and down, but just kind of the sense that I've gotten while no one has said anything to me, yay or nay, either way, it seems like Garrett Noonan's going to be back here for the duration. Unless something happens up in Milwaukee or with Nashville, it seems like we're going to have Garrett Noonan back for the remainder of the year. But getting that team defense all around it, and it starts in the net with Andy Isles, with Brad Thiessen, Brandon Whitney as well. Looks like since he's going to carry 3 goalies down the stretch also. But you look at your defensive cores out front as well. Offensively, you're going to have to get guys selling out, blocking shots, so working on that team defense as well. I think those are probably maybe the 2 biggest areas that I would say right now for Cincinnati.
And is it also, do you think that Thiessen will be back and for the long term with Cincinnati as well, barring anything happening higher up?
That's the sense that I get, and it's the toughest and it's probably the best problem that Matt McDonald has right now downstairs in that locker room. You've got the reigning ECHL goaltender of the month, and you have the reigning AHL goaltender of the month sitting right next to him in that locker room. So you've got 2 goalies, arguably the 2 best goalies in the ECHL right now, playing for you on your roster. So I think that is something that head coach Matt McDonald might lose a little bit of sleep over, but I don't think he's going to have a little bit of an issue, because being able to either put number 1 or 39 on that lineup sheet every single day, a fantastic problem. But like I said, in talking to him today, I kind of went downstairs to pick his brain a little bit. Looks like, barring anything with Korpisalo, with Bobrovsky, with McElhenney, whatever goes on down in Lake Erie or up in Columbus, it looks like we're going to have him here for the duration.
I'll just say, Everett, we'd like to talk in cliches as well, because we give it 110% every show and take it show to show. My big question is, worst case scenario, Noonan gets called up again, Thiessen gets called up again. Who is the person that's most likely to actually take this next step and step up for the Cyclones in their stead?
You know, that's a tough question because this team is so. When you look at who's been able to contribute, this team has been a complete team all season long. I mean, you look at Jack Downing, Zach Budish, Andrew Yogan before he was called up, Nick Hurd, one of the top 10 in rookie scoring all season long. Those are your top scorers. But then you bring in a guy like Tommy Mealy and Colin Mulvey. Brandon Graysell has been able to get goals for you. Christian Manella has been able to find scoring for you. And it can be, from an offensive standpoint, it can be one of any 10 or 12 guys on this team who can step up and get timely goals for you. But I think maybe the one player who was going to really have to take the reins here and say, all right, guys, I got it, I'm looking at Nick Hurd, and a guy who leads the ECHL power play goals as a rookie, 7th in rookie scoring in the league. I think a guy like Nick Hurd can step up and fill that void for you offensively up front, in addition to your Jack Downings, your Zach Budishes, your Brandon Graysells as well, Tommy Mealy. Defensively, I think a guy like Steve Weinstein, who we saw what he could do offensively earlier in the year, Brett Weissopel. And you look at Brett Weissopel's story. Earlier in the season, he played 45 seconds in his first game of the season, was injured after sitting out 30 games, and was out for another 10 or 12 games after that. So Brett Weissopel, since coming back from that injury, has really been one of the best defensemen for Cincinnati. Put 4 assists up on the board last weekend in those 2 games against Quad City and Indy. So I think Brett Weissopel, Steve Weinstein defensively, Nick Hurd, Brandon Graysell, those are going to be maybe the 4 guys that I look at. Again, like you said, worst case scenario, Noonan has to go up. With Teason leaving, those are going to be the 4 guys that I look at. And then don't forget, Andrew Yogan, Joe Pendenza also could come back from St. John's and from Milwaukee. It just kind of depends on where those teams are going. Andrew Yogan's been playing very, very well for St. John's, so I don't know what that's going to hold. Pendenza's kind of been up and down all season long, so we could see him back. He could be up there for their playoff run. So, but you look at the personnel right now. Up front, I'm looking at Graysell and Hurd. Defensively, I'm looking at Weissopel and Weinstein.
Talk about the job that Andy Isles has done. He was left on the scrap heap for a lot of ECHL teams. You know, the Cyclones had a real need for a goaltender there in that January time frame.
Yeah.
And he's really taken off there, and would have figured to be the odds-on starter for the playoffs had it not been for the return of Brad Thiessen. Talk about the job Andy Isles has done there.
I mean, he is that textbook definition of a guy making the most of the opportunity that he was given. And, I remember Andy Isles from when I was at Bowling Green and he was at Cornell playing in college hockey. The job that he did in Cornell, all the records that he set, he beat Ben Scrivens' record for all-time saves in school history, 5th all-time minutes played, consecutive starts, what have you. And I think that when he got up here to the pro level, and this is nothing against Andy Isles, taking nothing away from him, but kind of a smaller guy, reminds me a lot of a Jeff Lurg, kind of a guy who just overlooked a lot by some of those AHL, NHL teams, and then playing for Brampton this season, playing for Atlanta this season, the games he was in, didn't do bad. I mean, he played well in those 15 or so games that he was able to suit up for those 2, but Cincinnati, perfect opportunity at the right time. Brad Thiessen was gone, just got called up, so you had Brandon Whitney, and again, that was on that January trip. Cincinnati went through 3 emergency goalies in about 5 days, and it was just really funny because we're in Atlanta. In the morning, one of the morning of skate, Atlanta's screen printing guy, so the guy who does all of their team uniforms and track jackets and all that stuff, was our emergency goalie. Then we called in someone from the SPHL. We get to Norfolk, kind of the same thing. We had to use a Norfolk staff guy as a practice goalie. We're able to get in an emergency goalie for that game. So just having to call up those guys and those emergency goalies, but then you bring in Andy Isles when you're in Allen, and he's just gone out there and has made some of the most amazing saves that I've ever been able that I've ever seen this season, and again over the last few years that I've have been in hockey. But just making the most of that opportunity, going out there, he plays really well, and the guys love playing in front of him. He's one of the best teammates that I've seen in that locker room. Works hard. I mean, this guy's pregame ritual in terms of his preparation, in terms of what he puts into his body, in terms of how he takes care of his body, going out there first on the ice for practice, and even when he knows that he's going to go, he'll stay on for an extra 5 or 10 minutes, get a few shots in before taking off. So, really doesn't abide by that first goalie on, first goalie off, or last goalie on, first goalie off mentality. He will stay on to get his extra work if he has to get it. But, again, like I said, he's done a phenomenal job here. The guys love playing in front of him. And now head coach Matt McDonald has a tough problem in front of him because you get back a guy who has been proven for you in the past, but here's Andy Isles, who carried you through February. You were in a time when it was looking like Cincinnati may miss the playoffs, and now the Cyclones are challenging for that division, and a lot of the credit goes to Andy Isles. So who do you put in net? And it starts tomorrow. So, the next 24 hours are going to be tough for him, but like I said, I think with this team, as the goaltending goes, this team goes. So you get solid goaltending. If Brad Thiessen can be Brad Thiessen, if Andy Isles can be Andy Isles, Cyclones are playing June hockey. I'll call it right now. But as those two go, don't want to say it, don't want to put any bad juju on it. This could, the Reds next door could potentially, be playing longer than us. So we hope that we're playing in June, but I think a lot of it's going to rest on those two guys in net.
And I love your enthusiasm for the Cyclones. Love that in March you're calling that they're playing hockey in June.
Hey, you know what? A lot of us around here are saying it, and there's a buzz in this locker room. There's a buzz in the coach's office, in the front office, people upstairs, the ticket guys, everyone. They can kind of feel it, especially how this team has been playing as of late over the last month and a half, 2 months here. There's something in the air, and again, I've been using 1,000 cliches all this interview, but
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
There's something magical in the air here in downtown Cincinnati, and it's delicious.
We got Phil Collins waiting. Phil Collins is waiting.
Yeah.
Off screen right. So Everett, we'll get you out of here on this. How can people find you and the Cyclones on all the various social media channels?
Yeah, I mean, you want to follow us on social media. It's very easy, at Cincy Cyclones, CINCY That's on Twitter. Obviously, we're on Instagram as well, on Facebook. Me personally, I am on Twitter at The Voice Fitz, FITZ, The Voice Fitz. So very, very active on both channels. So come on, follow us. Like I said, it's going to be a pretty good stretch run. So look forward to having you guys follow us. Look forward to talking to you guys again.
All right, sounds good, and we will catch up with you as we near the playoffs. The voice
sounds good
of the Cincinnati Cyclones, Everett Fitzhugh. Thanks very much for joining us. All the best to you and
thanks,
the
Everett.
On the team.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right,
take care.
Thanks very much.
See ya.
There goes Everett Fitzhugh from the Cincinnati Cyclones, and we have a trade to announce. I wanted to do my Gary Bettman impression, so there's my. We have a trade to announce.
Oh!
Hello, how are you? There's my Gary Bettman impression. And so the Evansville Icemen have broken the ice. They've traded. You see what I did there?
I gotcha.
Totally unintended. They have traded defenseman Spencer Humphreys to South Carolina for defenseman Brandon Ellis. So there goes our first trade of the day. If you're scoring at home, defenseman Spencer Humphreys to South Carolina from Evansville for Brendan Ellis. And looking at this trade, Scotty, Ellis for South Carolina this year in 49 games, 6 goals, 19 assists, 25 points. And on the other side, for the Evansville Icemen, Humphreys has been a very solid player there as well, and he's been one of the more relied upon defensemen for head coach Al Sims. 54 games played, 2 goals, 14 assists, 16 points, and an even plus-minus. What do you make of this trade? Scotty.
Do I have myself muted? There we go.
There we go.
I didn't know I had myself muted. But it's interesting for South Carolina, considering the fact that Ellis has been one of their top rookies on the blue line. He's been a decent on their power play, whatever they get out of their power play on the defense, which isn't much. But I guess it looks like they're going towards a more defensive side and getting Humphreys in there, because Humphreys is a guy who, like you said, very solid guy, very sturdy on an Evansville team that has been coming up short and has been sub of par. I don't. I'm concerned for South Carolina in terms of their power play has not been sparking much, and they get rid of one of their guys who's been pretty effective on their power play overall.
Yeah, and to me, I said this in our live chat here at the sinbin.net/chat, and to me this kind of is a head scratcher of a move, because I mean, unless you're doing it, slightly more offensive defenseman for a slightly less defensive defenseman, or however that shakes out. But I mean, if you're the South Carolina Stingrays, you're not in a position to buy. It makes me wonder if this is more of a depth move than anything for the Stingrays. Now, still carrying 7 defensemen on the roster.
Yeah, I don't know. It's almost, like I said, I was talking to Chris Stewart, and he said there's very little apples to apples move. It seems like an apple to apple move. I mean, it seems very lateral. I mean, unless they're putting a lot on Venasek and what he can do in the playoffs, and just going to rely heavily on defense. That's the only thing I can reason in terms of why South Carolina would make a move like that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, it just seems like, given as close as they've been the last couple of years, I wouldn't think that, South Carolina would be a huge player at the deadline unless you were to turn that player, that 7th defenseman, around for a forward, and maybe Andrew Rowe is not coming back to the Stingrays this year. I mean, he did suffer an injury up at Bridgeport in the American Hockey League and has been out for some time. Maybe you try and package something together to get another forward. It's interesting to see sort of some of the mechanics that go on with an apples to apples move like this.
I will say this. It seems that Evansville is getting a lot younger. This is another rookie on a very rookie-heavy roster. I mean, obviously, with their move to Owensboro being kind of there, it's a thing, I guess. No one's really outwardly approved it. It hasn't been met with much fanfare, but it seems that they're kind of moving in terms of just going to the future and looking ahead to next year. It's going to be a very talented young squad in Evansboro. I'm just going to call them that. I'm just going to call them Evansboro. We're going to call them the Border Bandits, and then we'll make it happen that way, and we'll move on forward from that.
There was a team in the old Central Hockey League that was named the Border
City Bandits. Yeah, the Border City Bandits. They had a raccoon, I believe, as their logo, something like that. That's
right, they did. So, yeah. So we'll be able. You're right though, Scotty. Evansboro, wherever they end up next year, will be a very, very young squad and should be very much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something they'll need if in fact this move does happen, if they're not playing as nomadic teams for the first 17 months of the season. This could be a situation where we see it like the old Soviet Penguins of the IHL, where the Soviet team literally played a good amount of the IHL season on the road. 42 games, I do believe, are in that span, and like it's almost like they're a nomadic crew, but with a young team, an exciting team that could maybe get butts into the seats of the decrepit old building in which they're going to.
Yes, and here we are.
We're about done, aren't we? We're about up time.
1 minute out now from Mark. 1 minute to the ECHL trade deadline. And so far, that is the only trade we have, and now we have to fill some time.
Well, let's reset everything going on. Welcome to the Sin covered the ECHL trade deadline. I'm Scotty Waz. That is Matt Harding over there. One trade to announce, and that's Spencer Humphreys going to the South Carolina Stingrays for Brendan Ellis, who will go to the Evansville Icemen overall. That's the only thing. We have heard rumors of Missouri and Brampton possibly being into bed together. I have a call out to the Brampton Brass, and nothing has been returned or confirmed as of yet.
I will say that on Joe's end, Joe Rosicki, I've been in contact with him as we've been doing the interviews.
Who's he?
This afternoon. Yeah. He has not heard anything from Missouri either. So when people are quiet, moves are possibly being made, as you were.
Yeah, no, it's just a matter of we've got some calls out. I do not believe Colorado is making any moves. I'm checking that right now. And talking to Chris Stewart, he didn't seem too keen to be making moves right now, and I haven't heard anything from their end. So, and it looks like, hey, celebrate. It is now deadline day. Of course, moves can happen in their stead as we get closer and closer to our end time at 4. Wow. Okay, what time is it? 3 Central? There it is. I'm looking ahead to the East. I'm already on East Coast time, and I'm not even in the East Coast. It's really crazy. So we will go towards that. We'll have some more stuff to talk about. But are you surprised that we have not had as much, considering there has been, so many rumors out there of what teams could and could not do?
Yeah, but we're hearing from a source in Allen that Aaron Jens last night suffered a serious injury, and that Steve Martinson is on the look for a defenseman. So Jens could be gone for some time from the Allen lineup. Barry Jansen this morning reported that it would be several weeks. We're hearing it could possibly be longer, and that Steve Martinson has been looking for a defenseman today. We also heard earlier today that Barry Jansen also reported earlier this morning that Steve Martinson would be acquiring a quote-unquote defensive forward from Brampton, and there has been a name floated about, but we're not going to report that name yet as it has not been confirmed. So we'll see if that takes shape. And we also are hearing about, as what you were talking about here just a couple of moments ago, Scotty, that the other iron in the fire is that a significant player could be headed from Brampton to Missouri as well. So it seems like, in an answer to your question, that the teams at the bottom of the standings who have the most to give haven't really given it yet. And that to me is a little surprising, given the parity in the league and given how competitive the playoffs would be. I think if you were able to come down and acquire a Kale Kardashian from Wichita, or a young defenseman like a Michael Trebish from Evansville, or somebody like that.
Yeah, and it's surprising, especially with the Jens going down. You would think that Martinson, obviously being the guy he is would have been on the phone on the bench as that would have happened. And
he probably was.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not put it past him. He's making calls as the team's going to change. Listen, I got a guy. I can give you futures. So many futures. That's a crap call. Where's the trip? Listen, no, I can give you futures for now and for later. But I mean, it's interesting how we for all the thing, maybe it's again a chemistry situation. I do have a text right here. The Chesapeake Icebreakers are done for the day. Surprising move, as they have not existed for the past 15 years. So we have them confirmed. Also, the Miami Matadors had said Olay to their next team. So fun with old teams, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're doing here on the Sinbin.net trade coverage. Don't worry, we have some guests coming up. We're going to have who else do we have coming up? We have Cameron Close, I believe, towards the end, as we as from the Adirondack Thunder. Who else do we have on the docket?
2:30, and then here in just a few minutes, Mark Benetti from the Rapid City Rush. I'm waiting on a response back from Mark. The poor guy has been spread out all morning, so
I bet.
We're waiting to hear back from Mark. So until then, it's Phil, baby, Phil.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. So my computer crashed during the show, and that's the most horrifying thing I've ever experienced in my life. When I lost complete control of the thing, I had to log onto my little Chromebook here to make sure the broadcast didn't go down, to log into this little guy here, and that was a fun time to deal with. But yeah, just pulling the fun franticness of trade deadline day when you're a broadcaster or whatever we do. I think podcasting overall. How's the chat going? Have we had any questions? Are they ragging us too much on our appearance yet?
They are not. Surprisingly, Dakota and our wonderful IT guy Matt Thomas have kept an orderly chat. So they are doing a dandy job over there, and I'm waiting to hear back from my source on a name. So stand by.
Just
for that.
Any name, or just any kind of. I'll fill you.
On a name that could be a part of a deal.
Okay. You deal with that. I'll go ahead and give a reset of the people here in terms of standing wise as we sit here in the ECHL. Looking at the Eastern Conference, we got Manchester, Toledo, Florida as the top teams right now. Manchester in a big move, and we'll talk to Cameron Croce a little bit with the Adirondack Thunder. The Thunder have been a big surprise this season in terms of what they've been able to do as a first-year team and how they've been able to gel under Cale McLean, and he has been quite amazing in terms of that. In the Western Conference top 5, Missouri, Idaho, Fort Wayne. Missouri just they gone. They're just going ahead, and they're having fun with themselves right now. And Fort Wayne, as we spoke to Justin Cohen earlier, they are an interesting team to look at. They have Cincinnati on their tails, and consistency is going to be one of the big deals right there. And Idaho, you know what? I want to get your take on Idaho, because there hasn't been much in this Pacific Division or that West Division about Idaho and Utah. These are two teams I think are people are sleeping on a lot, and it's one of those things where it's the whole they're on the West Coast and people don't get to see them a lot. I'm surprised they haven't gotten as more of a push from anybody in the league, than what they deserve. I think they deserve a lot more credit.
I do too, and I think that if they got off to a slow start with their new coach and new defensive system there. The name of the coach has freaked me out.
I hate that. It's the worst.
I believe the former coach's name was Brad Ralph, and I believe Brad went to the Western League.
Yeah. He went out there, but look, you look at this team right now. I mean, Rob Linsmeyer has been amazing. Zach Ewan has been a pickup of the century for them. I mean, He comes off the scrap heap in Atlanta, and he's a guy who has made such a difference on their power play right now. And they mentioned as such in an article in the Statesman, like how great he has been, and that could be a sleeper addition for the Steelheads right now, is to get a young good defenseman in Zach Ewan, who I watched play in Tri-City of the Western League, and he is just a very skilled player, very calm, collected on the puck, doesn't let much get to him, and he's as well as he's good offensively, he's well off in his own zone as well. So I think a lot of people sleeping on Idaho. Utah, I have a hard time trying to pick out Utah and figuring out what they are. Just overall, last year they made a lot of noise with Bob Koff there in net, and now it's just that they're kind of there in that 4-5 middle spot, and they could surprise people, but they could also be ripe for getting taken out in the first round.
Yeah, you look at Idaho, and in our preview there, I wrote that Idaho could use some more scoring, but I didn't think that they would be terribly active at the deadline. Looking at their record, 7-1-1 in their last 10 games, 71 points, and they lead that West Division. We know that Texas is going to make a strong push for the playoffs if they're not already in it, given the American Hockey League's new convoluted playoff format out west. I almost think that maybe Idaho needed one more scorer here at the deadline, and I know those guys don't grow on trees, but if you can get a playoff guy, you get a playoff tested guy and a scorer from a team who is out of it, I think that you should at least inquire to make the move.
Yeah, and I mean Neil Graham, that's the coach's name. I found it
There
out.
you go.
Haha. Yeah, I think he's got a hold of things, and I think a loss of an Emil Mullen was a big deal for them. I mean, he had 19 goals in the season for him before his departure, and that's something where you have to worry about like the call ups and everything like that. There's a sad part of an affiliation, and by the way, on the AHL thing, I was told there would be no math in hockey, and the fact that there's percentage points now. I am beyond confused, and I wish I would have paid attention more. I'm doing like debit and credit sheets, trying to figure out who's going to make the playoffs in this team. But I may not have figured that out. But at least my bank account is somewhat balanced, so I got that going for me.
There you go. And at the end of the day, when you have a balanced bank account, that's all that really matters.
Exactly, because if you don't, you're screwed.
Yeah. So it looks like here, since we are live as live can be, as good old Jim Ross would say. Looks like we are going to have two guests on at 2:30. It'll be Mark Benetti from the Rapid City Rush, and we'll also have Cameron Close from the Adirondack Thunder. So we're gonna backload the last half hour of our show, and still trying to get a name on a possible defenseman in Allen, but we do know that a defenseman is being sought now that Aaron Jens, and I guess that is the breaking news right now, is that Aaron Jens is going to be out for a little while, and maybe even into the playoffs with an injury. And we're also hearing from Joe Rosicki that Jesse Root is day-to-day as well.
Hey, aren't we all?
He left Allen's game, the game with Allen, last night with a lower body injury and did not play the rest of the way. So pretty physical game there last night. One player for each side out due to injury.
Yeah, and I mean it's not like I think luckily for the Mavericks is not that they're short on talented players. I mean, as Root being the leading scorer, sure he's there, but Tyler Barnes is there, Rocco Corso is there. I mean, they got guys to spare. I mean, you don't want to lose a big offensive powerhouse like that, but at the same time, it's just like it's not like it's going to be at all that crippling, mind you. For a team that is literally they have already packed up and they're ready for the playoffs. Like I wonder what kind of mode they're going to be in going down the road. Like how tight are they going to be? What are they going to do in terms of roster going down the stretch? Who they're going to play? Who are they going to rest? That's going to be an interesting scenario what to do there, because you don't want to get guys too far out, give them too much time off, and then they're rusty for the playoffs. But at the same time, you also don't want to wear them out in the regular season and risk something dangerous happen like with what happened with Root.
Well, we had that discussion when I did the Send-In pregame show with Joe and Ryan on Sunday up there, and my thought was, at what point do you rest these guys? We understand that there is a checklist that they are going off of in Missouri. They want playoff spot, then division, then conference, then league titles, and they want all of that for the regular season, and that's well and good. But at what point, since this has been a grind and the playoffs are going to be much more intense, at what point do you sit a player out like a Trevor Ludwig or a CJ Ludwig and maybe sort of recoup them for a little while? Or is it, our playoffs begin now and away we go? I'm of the sentiment that their playoffs began when the X was put next to their name. So I don't think that they sit anybody for right now. Richard Matvichuk is going to play the system that he's always played, and if it wins him a championship, it wins him a championship. But one thing's for sure, this is obviously the best Missouri squad that has been there in their 7-year history.
You have to wonder, though, also in terms of what Parker Milner can do for you in net with Josh Robinson up and at them, and who's going to play there. Like once Robinson comes back, if Robinson comes, I'm pretty sure he'll come back. But who's going to carry them all the way?
Right, and I think Stephen Summerhays. I got to watch him in person against Tulsa on Sunday. Really good goaltender, and very underrated despite his record. So I think you have a good option in Summerhays and Milner obviously you're going to give the ball to Milner as much as you can in the playoffs and give Summerhays some reps to keep him sort of sharp as we go through the rest of the regular season. But I honestly don't think that you'll see Robinson back in Missouri until the season's over, given Springfield not making the American Hockey League playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, also Summerhays, a lot of his stats came with a very, very not good Alaska team as well. So
Yeah.
that didn't help his cause whatsoever. Oh man, I hate Springfield. Not the idea of Springfield, just the fact that they have Blue Jackets jerseys but a Coyotes patch on their shoulder. It's really weird and off-putting, and I'm really confused and get scared at times when I watch them play.
Yeah.
But that's just a personal fault of mine. Overall, still, I have heard nothing in terms of anything from Brampton right now. I don't know what you have heard in terms of your docket right now, but all quiet on the Western Front for me.
Yeah, same here. Just completing a couple of texts. Got a text out to Jason Mouse here in Wichita asking if Kevin McClelland has made any moves that the team can announce. And so far have not heard anything back from him. Wichita is another interesting case as well, and I had this in our Central Division preview last night on the sinbin.net, where I, sort of, do you sell the farm knowing that Coach McClellan may not be back, or do you leave the cupboard full and you say to these guys, okay, we're going to go out in the last 13, 14 games and give it a go here? What do you do? I mean, because Wichita does have some tradable assets.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the one with all. It's not even so much the year. It's like, again, what are you going to do with your coach? What are you going to do with the front office? How are these guys? Like, how much do you want to leave How much do you want to leave there? What kind of legacy does Coach McClellan want to leave there as he ventures off into a new thing? I mean, with teams like this, with Brampton, with other teams at the bottom, you wonder, what they could have done and what their focus could be right now. Nothing. It's just dead, and they're just like, all right, this is the hand that we've been dealt. To make sure it's all over and done with and leave it, and then hopefully in the summer we can figure it out from there. I'm surprised there hasn't been more moves. I'm surprised there hasn't been. I mean, it seems that future consideration has been our biggest friend overall, and I wonder when those futures are going to be claimed. I think that's another question there. Like, when are these futures going to be claimed? Now, here's a question for you, and I don't know if you know it. What are the waiver rules after the trade deadline? I know there's some waiver rules in the NHL. Are there? Do they go across the board for the ECHL too? Do you know offhand?
I have the CBA right here.
Wow, that's a big CBA.
That's a whole 70 pages, I think.
Wow, that's a lot of reading.
63 actually.
Oh.
And I did not even think to look at that last night, and I'm not going to bore our audience while I go back and look at that. I will inquire about that and have that answer for you tonight on the Sin Bin podcast.
Well, we have a Sin Bin podcast. How about you tell the people what the Sin Bin podcast is going to be about, Matt?
Well, we're going to be joined tonight by Zach Fish, and I believe we're working on Zach Fish and Jason Guarenti, and I believe we are working on also getting either Bobby Metcalf from Quad City or John Peterson from Evansville, one or both, and that will go off at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Scotty, you and I will be back. We'll be joined by Joe Rozicki and Ryan Gibson, and we will recap this ECHL trade deadline and look forward to the push to the playoffs, which begins in earnest tomorrow, actually begins tonight with a slate of games going on tonight in the ECHL. We do know that South Carolina plays in Greenville, and there are, I believe, 2 more games on the ECHL docket tonight as well.
We got South Carolina and Greenville. We've got Florida at Atlanta. We got Orlando at Brampton. And we've got Elmira at Adirondack. So 4 games on the slate. Now my question to you, are you surprised there are games on a deadline day like this where there could be, right now it's not, but there could be moving parts? How do you feel on a deadline kind of thing where there could be moving parts, just scrapping a day worth of games and making it up somewhere along the line, whether I have it before or after?
I'm okay with it. The NHL does it. I mean, their travel is a little bit easier, obviously. I'm okay with it. If it takes a player a day or two to get to a team and get to a location, that's fine. I mean, we heard Justin Cohn in our last hour say that Daniel Barchuk isn't even going to Alaska. He's going to meet the team back in Fort Wayne. So, um, you know, I'm okay with the ECHL playing on a deadline day. Do I think the National Hockey League should? Probably not. I mean, I don't think it's fair that those guys get to skate with the team in the morning and they get pulled off and then have to go clean out their locker and rearrange their lives and have to be with the team in 12 hours. But for ECHL players, because it is a minor league and you're not afforded the luxuries that people are up at the NHL, it's okay, I think.
Yeah.
You? What's your thoughts?
I'm with you on the NHL terms, and I think it's just scrap all the games in general. Like there's, especially on, I mean, at least with the AHL Monday, they don't have a lot of games on Monday throughout the schedule in general. I don't think there were a very limited number, if any, games on that trade deadline this past Monday, and stuff like that. I mean, I can see in the NHL, but the NHL guys can also afford it. I mean, they can figure, get a hotel room for a week. You ever lived in a hotel room for a week? It's fabulous. They just clean up after you. Amazing. Go down to room service. It's a great time. Sure, the circumstances might be right, but hey, you're living in a hotel. These things happen. And they can just go buy a condo out of cash, and they know enough people there. But yeah, I'm surprised at minor leagues in terms of that. Also, I'm not surprised he wouldn't go to Alaska. It's always dark there or always sunny there. I'm not really sure which it is right now. The time changes this weekend, so it could be just in that middle where it's actually equidistant, where you have the same amount of daylight and nightlight. I don't know how Joe did it this past earlier in the year when he went up to Alaska.
Yeah, I don't know either. So we'll have to have it when we have him for the podcast tonight. We'll ask him about that.
I tell you what, that's another team I'm surprised didn't do much, is the Aces. I mean, this is a team who,
yeah,
obviously out of their championship caliber in terms of just the past 2 years haven't been as good as usual. But you would think that they would be a team that would build for the future and try to sell that area to some guys who might be a little reluctant in going up there. I mean, acquiring a guy and just showing him, hey, this is how the town reacts to us. This is how you're going to be treated. How about you stay for another year or two?
Yeah, I mean, look at the assets that you have. If you're Rob Murray, you can turn around Peter Sivak, who I believe was already traded there once this season. Yeah, he was from Fort Wayne. Peter Sivak, Stephen Perfetto, William Wren, who is on our All-Star team this year as a defenseman. You have tradable pieces there, and again, I'm surprised that so far they've not made any moves. But I thought it would be one of those deals, kind of like Wichita, where when the moves started happening, it would be Katie bar the door because the full rebuild would be on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just the thing where I wonder what's happening in Alaska, man. Like, I wonder how shook they are that things have gone down this quickly, because I think they went from championship season to, were they out of the playoffs last year? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, they've not made the playoffs in 2 straight seasons.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing for a team that had the kind of quote unquote dynasty, or at least the notoriety that they've had in the past. Like you think Alaska Aces, you think minor league hockey. They have been one of the predominant teams in turn, even ever since coming over from that little, I guess, merger / hostile takeover, the WCHL. This is a team that was one of the creams of the crop that came over from the WCHL.
Well, and I think that was, them and to another extent South Carolina, really the 2 dynasties in ECHL history so far. All Alaska has done is come in and win 4 straight regular season titles and 3 Kelly Cups. South Carolina's had 4 Kelly Cups in their club history, or I believe 4.
I think that's right.
Yeah, 4. In their club history, you got to look at those as long-lasting dynasties, and every franchise runs on a hard time, and that's, I think, what we're seeing here. But do you make a move? Do you make a move like Indy did with Scott Hillman with Rob Murray now with 13 or 14 games left. Do you let him ride out the rest of the season and then make a move in the offseason? Scott Hillman is available, and Scott Hillman's name will be bandied about here in Wichita as well as a possible replacement for Kevin McClellan. So going to be an interesting – if you're Scott Hillman, it's good to know that you're wanted.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, his resume, what is it? Precedes him. That's the word. Yeah. I almost said presumes him. I'm like, that's probably not right. I'm an English major. Not really. It's one of those things where Hilton has carte blanche at this point. Like, he's looking at everywhere he can go, and I'm sure he's studying. He's going to probably take the rest of the season off and just study what he has. And he's a guy who's very, I guess, calculated in where he goes. He went to Indy. For the sheer fact that, this could have been a good situation for him. Turned out, pucks didn't bounce his way. And now he almost seems to have just the lay of the land right now. He can see what he can do, and he's going to put himself in the best situation because, as much as he probably likes a challenge, he also wants to make sure that he doesn't fall deep into a hole where it's just like, okay, this guy can be a game changer, but with the assets he has, it wasn't going to happen. And we put him in a bad situation. We almost set him to fail. So he's going to take a lot of time and just examine everything they have. And I'm surprised, more teams haven't maneuvered to try to get him into their system and try to get moves and younger players onto their team to lure him in there.
I'll ask this because I didn't want to do this with Tom, obviously, but do you think Scott Hillman kind of got a raw deal there being fired with 13 games left?
I think he got a raw deal just getting fired in the second year of a team. I mean, I don't know what the ownership was expecting. That's why I asked him what he thought the season would be if they don't make the playoffs or what have you, because it seems that an expansion team is going to take a couple years. And it's not like they haven't been competitive. I mean, they've been up there. They've been trying to make their mark, but it just seems that, you can only do so much with what you have. And once you get rid of a guy like Shane Owen and you have Matt Carruth there, and it starts from the net out, it seems. Yeah. And when you have those guys not around, it's going to be an uphill battle. So I think he definitely got a raw deal in the sense that I think there was probably too much given or too much expected, and then the parts just not being there, whether it be through call-ups or just circumstance. And 2 years from an expansion team to make the playoffs, it's pretty rough. It's not like they weren't competitive. It's not like they're at the bottom of the barrel. So I think I guess raw deal is the only word you can say. I think it was just a sad happenstance almost.
Yeah, and I think Hillman did a really good job of getting the Fuel, taking them from as young as they were, because he told us in an interview we did off of or during the summer that he took a really young Indy team and he moved them to the 9th spot. And they were expecting big things from him and from that team this year. So I think ultimately he sort of got bit by the expectation bug. I think he kind of got a little bit of a raw deal there, but I mean, everybody's supposed to show growth in their job, and when you start out really well, like Indy did, and then you kind of go topsy-turvy like the stock market for the next 4 months of the regular season, it's hard to tell that progress has been made. So, we're not privy to what was going on behind the closed doors and in the locker room and things like that. Maybe he lost the locker room, not sure. I don't see Scott Hillman losing a locker room because I just don't think of him as that kind of head coach. But, maybe something like that happened where a change was needed, and hopefully the Indy Fuel respond to Bernie John and have some success, because I think that race for 8th in the West is wide open.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you look at the roster, Kyle Stroll not being there, Josh Britton not being who he's supposed to be, and what his resume has said. Though I have to say one thing, and this, I'm going to put this out here, just between you and me, Matt, and everybody else listening. Yeah. I think they got a new slogan for the rest of the season, and this is completely original. All right. Feel the burn. Feel the burn. Feel the Bernie Johns. Done. Dusted. We've got it going, and we're good to go. And now, thankfully, with that bad pun, we have another guest. Matt, how about you tell us who's with us now?
All right. Sounds good. And he is the voice of the Rapid City Rush, Mark Benetti. Hey, Mark, thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. How's it going, buddy?
It's going, man. Thanks so much for having me. And I feel deeply disheartened that you've replaced my puns with somebody else. But I guess that's just how it goes sometimes.
There are plenty of puns to go around and impressions, but we'll have time for those later. The Rush have been very active this week, making another pair of trades earlier this week. Why don't you tell us about the new faces up there in the Black Hills?
Well, the other day, the Rush had traded Danny Barchuk to the Fort Wayne Comets for future considerations, and then they also traded Danik Gauthier to the Norfolk Admirals for Jonathan Lassard. And if you recall who Jonathan Lassard is, just 2 years ago he won a Central Hockey League championship with the Allen Americans. So somebody who had a career year, 57 points in 62 games, who's going to bring a lot of grit. The ability to finish his checks, and also the ability to find people to put the puck in the net. So those are really big trades. And as you saw last week, too, we made some other ones as well, getting Ryan Walters and Josh McDonald. What a historic night that both of them had in a trade for Cody Ferrio to the Utah Grizzlies. So we've been pretty active as of recently. And, now the deadline's passed. The dust is finally starting to settle, and it's been something special these last couple of days. I think I've written more press releases this week alone than I have in probably an entire month combined in my almost 3 years of being with this team. So we've been pretty busy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you can confirm for us that the Rush did not make any more moves this afternoon.
As far as I'm aware, that is exactly the case.
But they did sign a player this morning. Tell us about Ryan Lucic, or Zach Lucic, I'm sorry.
Zach Lucic is a rookie from Sacred Heart. Just finished up his collegiate career. Came in yesterday. We got him all situated and sorted out. This is a fast kid who, again, it adds physical presence. Coach DeSantis really prides himself on putting together a very physical club. And one of the basic fundamentals for all of us that know and love this game is if you want to play physical, you have to finish your check. There's no flybys on the ice, and that holds people accountable in so many different levels in the game. And that's what Zach can bring. He's 5'11", he's 200 pounds, he's very well put together, and when he crashes into somebody, he will blow them up. So, it's always great to see that physical grit that somebody brings to the game, board play, and it's something else.
How has the move of Joe Ferris stepping down into the GM role affected the team overall, and how has the team been able to work under Mark DeSantis?
Well, it's changed in a respect that there's a different voice. In some cases, sending the same message, and I mean, you guys know from watching the sport as long as we have that anytime you get a coaching change, there's always a clean slate feeling, if you will. So when it came time for Coach DeSantis to take over, it was the same message but with a different person saying it, and with that different person also came a couple of different intricacies that, Desi has his own way of doing things. And one of the biggest things that he stressed right off the hop was that I'm going to hold you accountable based on your work ethic. If you're not giving me everything, you're not going to skate. If you're giving me everything you've got, you're going to be out on the ice all the time, because that's the kind of people that I need here. It's a whole different system of accountability. And the move hasn't even just changed the tone in the locker room. It's changed the tone all over the organization. I've been joking the last couple of days that Joe has turned our entire office into a set of Home Improvement, the reboot, because every single day I see Joe walking around. He's got a toolbox, he's carrying a ladder, he's got a hammer. He's trying to put his touch on the front office now. It's been very refreshing upstairs to have him there, that's for sure. But it's such a great change, and you see in the numbers this team's ability to win games and get points has been absolutely critical. They're 5-2-2 in 9 games since Coach DeSantis has been named the head coach. So something's clicking. It's clicking at the right time, where there's still a scenario that this Rush team can make the playoffs.
And what is that scenario? Because Tulsa's kind of backslid a little bit to that 8th spot. What is the scenario for the Rush to make the playoffs? Is it essentially win out and hope that the teams in front of you sort of lose out, or
that's essentially what it really comes down to. I don't want to sound cliche, because that's the last thing we want in sports interviews because it's so rampant. But yeah, you just simply have to win. It sounds simple, but it's the toughest thing you can do. At the end of the day, though, in a scenario like that, you have to take care of what you can control, and what you can control is what you do in your 60 minutes on any given night. So, yeah, it's great that, I hate to say that because Tulsa's a great club, but it's great that they're skidding, because that's what this Rush club needs outside of what they can control 60 minutes a night on the ice. So the scenario is the Rush are 9 points out with 14 games to go, and it is still very much possible that this team can make it. They need some help, but at the end of the day, it is possible. So we'll see what happens.
All right, and while we have Mark on the line, we're also joined now by the voice of the Adirondack Thunder, Cameron Close. Cameron, how's it going? Thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, how are you, Matthew?
Good, thank you very much. Let's get started with your angle on this. The deadline is 34 minutes past, and Adirondack quiet as a church mouse, right?
Yeah, and sometimes that's the best thing you can do on a deadline, I think. Especially, we're really happy with the roster that's around here, and obviously it's been working. We've had our fair share of problems, like every team, due to injuries and call-ups and what have you. But with the exception of that, we've got a pretty solid group and a really good base. So I don't think there was any need to make too many adjustments.
What's been the biggest marker of success so far for this team? Has it been being up in contention for home ice through most of the season, or is it just the overall success that you've had in your inaugural season in the ECHL?
I think we're just happy with the way that I don't think the inaugural season necessarily changes too much. The fans at first were very skeptical of the league change, like I think we talked about months ago when we first spoke, and definitely that skepticism has gone away as the season has progressed, and they've seen the play on the ice is very similar, very comparable to the American Hockey League level. I think the winning has been one of the biggest parts of that. So just nice to have a team in here that's winning, and the fans really appreciate it, and they appreciate the effort that the team puts out on every night.
Talk a little bit about Michael Kilpatrick and what he's been able, as a young player, to come in and then lead the team in scoring as it is right now. How great has it been for the team to have someone that young take a big step in being one of the leaders in on-ice production for this team?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We're in a situation here where at the beginning of the year, you look at how many rookies we have on our team, and we knew that some of them were really going to need to step up and play very big roles. So Michael Kirkpatrick has been able to do that, and he's been exceptional on the power play. And he's in a situation where, if he wasn't under a contract with the Calgary Flames, he'd probably be in the AHL right now, one way or another. Stockton's just very stacked at that center and that forward position, so he hasn't been able to get a chance up there. But he is a very skilled player, and it seems like whoever he's on a line with, he's making them better, his wingers, and then he's very solid in the face-off circle, which is where it all starts.
Talk about the job, Cameron, that Cale McLean has done, having been out of the ECHL ranks for a little while, but coming back and essentially hitting the ground running. He's done a phenomenal job, and I think if it weren't for the success of the Missouri Mavericks, he would be the odds-on favorite for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, Cale is great, and I've never worked with a better coach personally, and I think a lot of the players would say that as well. He's a very straightforward guy. There's no tiptoeing around Cale, and he's not going to ever tiptoe around you. Everything is very out in the open with the team, with the staff, everything from all levels. And he's just a really good coach. First and foremost, he is very systematic, very structured, but he's also played the game at the ECHL level. He played the game at the ECHL level for a long time, so he understands what not only the players are going through, but where they want to be and where each of them are individually in their careers. He's been a captain of an ECHL team, of course, with the Stingrays before being the head coach there, the assistant, and then the head coach there. But he's just he's selling the players are buying what he's selling, and that's why the team is whatever it is, 26-0-2, went up after 2 periods. They're a very systemed and structured team, and the team buys into it. And this team now has come back in 3 straight games down in the third period, and that's because in the locker room, no one ever really on this team thinks that they're out of a game or thinks that they're going to lose, and that's a very dangerous team to be playing against for the opposition.
Mark, talk about, we've had this situation now with Indy removing Scott Hillman and the rush with the situation with Mark DeSantis now becoming the coach. How does the message change? We were talking. Cameron was just talking about having a system and a clear message on the team. How has the message changed from Joe Ferris to Mark DeSantis?
I think there's a number of ways. For starters, it could be the way that it's presented. You and I we're not in the locker room nearly as much as we'd like to be, so we don't get to see all those conversations. We don't get to see a lot of all of that. We see what's just barely on the outside of the locker room, and that's that. But so maybe it's a different way of presenting the message, presenting the strategy, and then it's it comes down to maybe there's a different approach in the message. Like Coach DeSantis and Coach Ferris, they both expect the absolute best out of their teams. They do, but there's a different way to approach, a different way to get that message across, and one way works one time, the other way works a different time. That's really what it all comes down to. It's hard to explain, but at the end of the day, I think it comes back to what I had said earlier about Coach DeSantis taking over and the team doing so well because it's a clean slate. Everybody feels like with a new person, there's a new beginning, and quite honestly, the numbers, at least for us this year, have showed that.
Cameron, want to just touch on briefly here. What is the ceiling for the Thunder as we head toward the playoffs? Is it, obviously the first thing is to get in, but I think it's fairly comfortable for you guys to get in. But overall, what is the ceiling for this team headed into the playoffs? It doesn't look like Stockton will make the AHL's version of the playoffs, and so maybe you guys could get some help from them down the stretch here.
Yeah, not just Stockton, but Rob Bordson, who was the captain of our team to start the season, is with Iowa. It doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs. Kyle Flanagan's in Binghamton, and I don't believe that they're going to make the playoffs. You could correct me on that, or it doesn't look like they're going to. So you never know who this team is going to get back. Really, the only players that we've sent up, Ken Appleby has gone to Albany, who's a very good team, and then Utica is very good. They have David Shields, but depending on players' personal agendas, we could very well be getting a lot of players back, and I think the ceiling is a conference final or championship for this team. That's definitely the goal that's on everyone's mind, of course, starting the year, and I don't think that changes. And where we are in the standings right now, this team is, I think, going to be a top contender in the Eastern Conference, at least, along with Manchester and South Carolina. We saw them last week. They're a heck of a good team. So there's some really big players, and I like to think that the Thunder are one of them in the East. I think that the idea is a championship, and that's what they're going to be going for. I mean, that's what is on everyone's mind, and that's the goal that's in the locker room.
Now, Cameron, let's look a little bit about the depth of the Thunder, because, I mean, like you said, a lot of guys getting called up because there's a lot of AHL teams in that Northeast corridor to pull from. How important has that depth been to the Thunder overall in your eyes because of all these call-ups?
Absolutely, the depth's been important, and it starts with that we've got a lot of rookie players, and a lot of them have stood right up. And, right now our starting goaltender, a kid who was invited to training camp as a body, and he is a guy who the team rallies around. They love playing in front of him. Drew Fielding is his name, and he's played excellent. Just keeps team in it all the time. He came back from Brampton. He was at them for a little bit, and we kind of got into goaltending trouble, and luckily Brampton got some extras, so we were able to reacquire Drew, and the team just plays so well in front of him. He's a great locker room guy, and it starts right there. When your third goalie, a guy that you didn't think was going to be making it out of training camp, is your top guy and someone who you could see leading a team into the playoffs, I think that says a lot about depth right there. And then at forward and defense, it's the same thing. All the way down to the third line, you've got tenured guys, James Henry and Alex Carrier, big bodies in our lineup that make it so you have 10 forwards on any given night that are all very tough to play against, and there isn't really a weak line or a weak defensive pairing on the team for the most part. Every so often we've had those bare bones nights where unfortunately we'll have a few injuries, and as everyone does, and you have someone sitting on the bench for the majority of the game. But as of late, we've been very solid, and the depth has proven very well.
Handicap that Eastern Conference for us, and Mark, you can handicap the Western Conference for us as well. Give us one team, each of you, give us one team in the respective conferences you work in that you would be scared to play in a 7-game series.
I guess I'll go. I think South Carolina is a very, very good team. They're very physical. They play a really high-tempo game, and we were able to sneak one away from them in overtime, but it was a third-period comeback, and it was very close game down to the wire, chances going back and forth in overtime as well. They're a really tough team. Again, physicality and skill, those are the two traits, and I think we aren't the most physical team in the Eastern Conference, and if we try to play that tough, rough and tough game, it's something that the team can handle and the players like to play, and they can stand up for themselves, but we're generally not going to win too many games like that if we have to play that toe-to-toe. But as far as playing with physicality and skill, I think South Carolina is a really good team and someone that I could really see going far. Florida, we haven't seen them in a long time. I know that they've been up top, but I can't really say anything about them yet. We'll be seeing them. Actually, I don't think we see them again this season. I have to double-check that. But so they could be very good, but I wouldn't know. They've been up at the top of the Eastern Conference. But South Carolina, Manchester's very good too. South Carolina is one that it'd be a really entertaining series at the very least.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same thing about the Western Conference. There are so many different teams that you get them in a 7-game set, and it would completely change the complexion of how the bracket would play out. If I had to pick one team, and this is an interesting suggestion on my part because the Rush haven't seen this team all year or ever really, is the Cincinnati Cyclones, because that is a team right now that is starting to heat up. I think 6-0-1 in their last 7 games, and they're playing some great hockey, great goaltending that they've got. They're putting the puck in the net, nice versatile scorers up front, guys that can distribute on the back end. But each team that's in the bracket right now has something that, regardless of where they fall in the bracket, they can still bring something devastating to the game. I think just from the division rivalries right now, Colorado, one of the toughest teams to play against in the entire league. Utah, arguably one of the fastest, if not the fastest team in the Western Conference, maybe next to Alaska. So if you can't keep up with them, they will outskate you for 60 minutes. Idaho is just, you talk about depth that Adirondack has with Cameron's club over there. Idaho's the same way. Just looking at the weekly rosters that we get on the communications distribution emails, they've got so many guys right now called up to the American League, to the ECHL level. So Idaho's got a great sense of depth that could eventually power them through a full 7-game series or multiple 7-game series, depending on how that plays out. So yeah, I mean, just from what I've seen, the trends that I've seen, Cincinnati would be pretty tough because that's a team that's heating up at the right time against 6-0-1 in their last 7 games. But I mean, any team really that you play against in the Western Conference bracket is kind of tough. So.
Scotty, you got anything for the guys?
I think I want to ask Mark just one thing about just setting up for next year. Obviously, the Rush are coming back in terms of just having a nice little run, and then Tulsa having. But in setting up for next year, do you think that all the moves they've made have made it, even though if they don't make it, there's a little bit of promise in going into next season with what they have right now?
Oh, no doubt in my mind. And the reason that I say that at the end of the day comes back to the fact that Coach DeSantis is running the show now downstairs. He's starting to get players that are coming into his system. He's starting to implement things that he's wanted to with this team, and that's why there has been such an improvement. Maybe the players might not stay, but Coach DeSantis will. And that alone is going to set up what's going to be a great season next year, because if you look at Desi's track record as a head coach, he has seen nothing but success. His first year was 12-13 in the SPHL. He took a Fayetteville Fire Ants team that had nothing the year before and turned them into a regular season champion, similar to the turnaround that Toledo had just 2 years ago, where they were bottom of the entire league, and then all of a sudden last year they're winning the Brabham Cup. And then he comes to Brampton, their inaugural year, their only year really in the Central Hockey League, and leads them to a 6th place finish, gets them into the playoffs. They lose to the defending champions in a very tight series. And then you see Coach DeSantis leave, and then Brampton's not really doing as well. So, just having Desi alone, forget even the players, just having Coach DeSantis alone is really going to do a lot for this club. And because of the success he's had, that will cause the players to stay. And that will cause other players to say, hey, he's doing something here that I don't think most other coaches are picking up on. Let's give this a shot. So, absolutely. I think that, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, which would be a shame considering the turnaround they've made in such a short amount of time, I think that the future is looking very, very bright for this club.
All right, and one more question for you. I will ask both of you how you guys can be found on social media. Start with
my Twitter handle is cclose19. I don't necessarily use it as much as I probably should, but every so often, maybe once every couple weeks, you might see something thrown out. Very, very, very rarely, but cclose19 if you want to follow me.
Yeah, I got to say the same thing there, Cameron. We really should get a little more active on that stuff. If anybody wants to follow me out there, it's Benetti Rush PXP, BINETTI Rush PXP on Twitter.
All right, sounds good. Cameron Close and Mark Benetti, thank you both very much for joining us on our ECHL Trade Deadline show, and we will catch up with you guys as we near the end of the regular season. Thanks very much, fellas.
Thanks, boys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. See you, Mark.
See you guys.
All right, and there they go, our last two guests on our ECHL Trade Deadline show, Mark Benetti and Cameron Close, and that is a full slate. It is 2:49, and still not a peep from Allen, but they did tweet that they have acquired somebody, and I believe it is a defenseman, but do not quote me on that. But waiting to hear back on who that may be. Again, if you're just joining us and a fan of the Allen Americans, first of all, where have you been? Second, Aaron Jens is going to be gone for a little bit due to an injury he suffered last night. And as we wait for the Allen trade memo to come out, or whoever they've traded with for that trade notice to come out, the one team that I honestly thought would make a move, Scotty, that didn't was Tulsa.
Yeah. I mean, especially with what they're trying to go through, right? I mean, they're skidding, and you would think they want to do something to rebound, right?
Right. Yeah. They're gosh, they've lost, we've talked about this ad nauseum here. They've lost 6 in a row in that 8th spot, and I thought that they would make a move, but maybe the move for them is to have a plane load of guys come down from Manitoba here sometime soon and help them get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't. But if what you get from Manitoba is going to be any better, because that's a team who's also in a lot of peril in terms of what they had to offer in the AHL this year, being one of the downtrodden teams. And again, does it disrupt the chemistry of what you have? I guess it doesn't matter. You've lost 6 straight, so maybe a little shakeup isn't a bad thing. But you would think just if they didn't come down, a little bit of insurance here and there, that could have been a good thing for them to deal with as well. But now we sit here, we have the one trade, and that's been that. I'm very surprised Tulsa, amongst other teams, haven't done anything aside from Allen and maybe even some other ones that are backlogged because Gertrude can't put the little plug into the other plug there at the Princeton home office.
That's true. And if you're just joining us, the one trade that we've had so far today has been defenseman Evansville shipping defenseman Spencer Humphreys to South Carolina for defenseman Brandon Ellis, and that is, again, the only move we have heard of so far. But again, moves needed to be, or notice of a move needed to be into the league office by 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Doesn't mean it needed to be announced by 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So we may have moves yet to be made. That transaction roster will be very interesting to read when we get it in our email coming up here in a little over an hour from the league office there in Princeton. Hopefully Gertrude is on the typewriter typing that up as we speak. But
her arthritis is out of control today. I feel bad for her. We should send her a fruit basket.
We should. She's got to stop playing golf. It's 80 degrees there. Come on, get off
she's
the
like,
golf
you know
course.
what? She's a scratch golfer now. She's doing well. She might the U.S. Senior Women's Open. Who's to say? The world's her oyster, and who are we to say she can't go from the telephone booth and hit a 9-iron out there? And I don't know golf. I'm just saying things right now.
There you go. Yeah. So we'll be interested in seeing what the ECHL roster, transaction roster, looks like as of later on this evening, and that is why we're having a special edition of the Sin Bin podcast tonight. Scotty will be back with me and Joe Rosicki and Ryan Gibson, and that gets going at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Our guests include Zach Fish from the South Carolina Stingrays, as well as Jason Guarenti from the Reading Royals. Some other news that we can tell you about here in the last few minutes. The Florida Everblades, we understand, so far have not made any deals. At least that is what their beat reporter Ryan Toohey is reporting. Wheeling stayed quiet for the 8th year in a row. Wheeling has not made a deal on deadline day.
Wow.
Yeah, so they are quiet as well. And Bobby Metcalf out of Quad City reports that the Quad City Mallards have not made any moves at the ECHL trade deadline. So, maybe this is a little bit of a maybe this is what Chris Stewart was talking about with it being hard to get an apples for apples deal. Maybe I could see Quad City, and Bobby brought this up on Twitter here a few minutes ago, and when he was chatting with Joe Rosicki. Quad City has been burned a little bit by future considerations, and Kyle Beach is going to be overseas again next year. He was maybe expected to come over at some point and help the Mallards, but that appears to not be happening, obviously.
Yeah, I could have told you Kyle Beach wasn't going to be reliable. I could have told you that years ago when he played in Spokane. I could have told you that right there. In any case, yeah, I mean, it could have been a situation where you can't get a deal, and you're not going to force a deal either. You're not going to, because you're just mortgaging something. You'd be like, and Chris Stewart said sometimes the young guys that you have are going to be some of your best players going down the stretch, so you don't want to get rid of them for something that's just a quick fix when you can develop them through this year and into next year and so on and so forth. But I will tell you one thing, the Nailers thing is it's quite shocking to me. They're obviously not putting the wheeling and dealing. So I think they should change their name to just West Virginia Nailers. I will put that out there and just going to, just leave it there. Just let it sit. Let it sit. Huntington doesn't have a team anymore. The hell with them. Morgantown, they got the Volunteers, or what? No, they're the Mountaineers. Volunteers, Tennessee. Point is this, ladies and gentlemen. The Nailers are very fixed with what they have. I can't blame them. And good on them. God bless them. Godspeed to them.
Yep, and they are at 63 points, 29, 23, 2, and 3. Winners of 8 of their last 10. So, if Elmira slips up at all, or even Reading for that matter, that's a dogfight for the last spot in the East. Looks like 4 teams separated by 2 points, positions 6 through 9 at the start of play tonight. Atlanta in the 6th spot, Reading in the 7th, Elmira in 8th, and then Wheeling in 9th. And Kalamazoo is making a push as well, winners of 8 of their last 10. So, don't count out Kalamazoo or even Greenville yet. I think Greenville is the deepest team in that South Division offensively. I could have seen Brian Gratz maybe making a move for a defenseman there, since they kind of have they've allowed 185 goals in 57 games so far this season, over 3 goals a game on average. So that may be their undoing there in Greenville, but it's going to be an interesting next couple of hours as we start to see these trades roll in and see who picked up what.
Yeah, and I mean with Greenville, they always have the Jack Combs effect. So let's not discount them just yet. He can carry them to the promised land, or at least to the airport when he goes over to Switzerland. I mean, and it's funny because like Greenville had a decent goaltending tandem last year, and it seems that this year, there's something there that hasn't been able to keep the pucks out. I'm quite interested in that. And back on Wheeling for a bit, they also have guys up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and what's going to happen there? Are there going to be guys that return from there to help them out and maybe boost them up? I mean, Army and Burton and guys are up there, so I mean that could help them out too if they get them back.
That's an excellent point, and I think that could be the reason why Wheeling didn't make a deal at the deadline, because they have a logjam of guys strewn throughout the American Hockey League. Whenever they get those back, Wheeling could be very dangerous. Frankie Palazis has been a very, very good goaltender for them. Got a little banged up last year in that Toledo series, and that was the turning point in that series for Wheeling, or else they would have taken out the Brabham Cup champs. So, obviously, that Eastern Conference wide open when you get below the 5th slot there. And Tommy Daniels wanted me to remind everybody that Allen has won 7 straight games. So do not overlook the defending Kelly Cup champs. We're never one to sleep on them, even though I kind of bet against them earlier in the year. And thanks, Tulsa, for helping me out there.
Listen. Now, Tommy is a good guy, and we're all friends here, but I'm tired of his 3 championships across 2 leagues mentality that he has, that is trying to rule over this. Oh, we won 7. Listen, Tommy, we get it. You guys are good down there. You got the leading scorer once again. Whoopity-doo. But listen, you don't tick off somebody like the Wichita Thunder and think you can get away with it. They're going to make things. I don't know what I'm talking about right now. Oh, we got 3 championships in 2 leagues. How dare you? How dare you, Tommy? Kick a man while he's down there. Kick a man while he's down. How dare he?
Yeah, Tommy's a good dude.
I like him. I
love Tommy. He's one of the best. 7 straight home games. I said 7 straight. That is 7 straight home games. So. And when I get the facts wrong, it's time for us to shut her down. So we have reached our allotted time. We could go forever on YouTube, but it is now.
That's the bell that says we're over.
There you go. Now 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 Central, and so we are going to take a break in our ECHL Deadline Day coverage. We thank you all very much for watching. Scotty, thank you very much for doing this. Also, thanks to our staff over working the chat room, Matt Thomas at Sinbin IT Guy, Dakota Johnson at Sinbin Cyclones, our intrepid reporter in Allen, Barry Jansen at Allen Americans 1. Thank you to Everett Fitzhugh, Patrick Williams, Justin Cohn, Tom Callahan, Mark Benetti, and Cameron Close for joining us on our inaugural Sinbin Trade Deadline show. Thank you very much for joining us. We will be back in 4.5 hours with another live edition of the Sinbin podcast, and I'll be joined by Joe Rizicki, Ryan Gibson, and that guy on the other side of the screen, Scotty Waz. For everybody at the Sinbin, I'm Matthew Harding. Thank you very much for watching, and we will talk to you again later this week. So long for now.
Bye, everybody.